Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. I'd say welcome to everyone over on Rumble, but they're still watching the NCI over there, the National Citizens Inquiry. So we have that rolling over on Rumble. And we can only run one stream at a time on our platform over there. So that's what's going on. We have to figure out a way to get a second channel going there, I guess, because we have so much material we're producing. We have a lot of other stuff to talk about tonight, though. Not the least of which is Professional Development Day today for some teachers in my neck of the woods. And what were they using that for? To hold workshops. The teachers were holding workshops to prepare for drag queen story time events. We'll touch on that. Also going to begin what I think will end up being a series of conversations on Nazism, Canada's role in harboring Nazis after World War II, where we're at with the situation with Nazis today. Tonight we're going to talk about, in Canada, monuments to Nazis and how all of that relates to what is going on right now in Ukraine, and how that all is associated with, connected to the ongoing friction, conflict, war with Russia, this third world war, really. Canada has a long history of flirting with Nazism, and it's something that very few people talk about. It's something I would say a lot of people aren't even aware of. A lot of Canadians just don't think about it. It's always been lurking in the background, though. We'll touch on that tonight. So many other stories to touch on tonight. Also, we'll probably mention the tanker that was seized by Iranian forces. It was bound for Texas. We will talk about a proposal to put cameras in federal courts in the United States. I'll talk a little bit about that. That's something that has been an ongoing question even in Canada, but the direction that the two countries have gone in has been very much different. There's also a J6 defendant who is camping in a park while he goes through the process of dealing with his court case because he has no money. So we'll touch on that as well. And those are some of the main stories we'll talk about this evening. Federal workers in Canada also still on picket lines. Day 10 of their strike today. Federal government did table a new offer, apparently. We don't have all the details, but there is a new offer on the table. I don't think it helped much. The PSAC workers have been escalating their strike actions, doing things that got the truckers in a whole lot of trouble. We'll discuss it. Don't go away. When we come back, we're going to start with Canada reaching a new agreement with the U.S. to curb cross-border gun smuggling. I shall return.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Has signed a new agreement with the U.S. to curb gun smuggling. This just within the last hour or two. Federal Ministers Marco Mendicino, who is the Public Safety Minister for Canada, and the Justice Minister, David Lametti, were joined by Alejandro Mayorkas, who is the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, and Merrick Garland, the U.S. Attorney General, in Ottawa. They made the announcement there during a news conference. It follows the conclusion of the 2023 Canada-United States Cross-Border Crime Forum. So Mendicino has announced that a number of new or updated agreements have been reached that involve law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border. The goal has been or is to combat cross-border gun smuggling and trafficking. Both Canada and the U.S. have also agreed to take additional action to address the drug crisis, the opioid crisis specifically, as well as to fight human trafficking, anti-money laundering, countering foreign interference, and reforming the criminal justice system. Those were some of the main subjects discussed. Here's the signing ceremony. As I say, it just happened moments ago in Canada's capital, Ottawa. Oh, there it is. It's official. That's Mendicino. So there was some discussion here too, of cryptocurrencies being used to purchase illegal weapons and being used by organized crime in the commission of such offenses. So that's the Justice Minister there to the left, and we'll just pull out of that. And what we'll do is we will give you the remarks from David Lametti, Canada's Justice Minister. Right now, here we go.
That's important to underline. I also want to thank Ambassador Cohen for his role in facilitating.
So again, this is affecting both the U.S. and Canada,
as well as everyone who has worked to make this happen. This meeting has been a great opportunity to discuss the complexities of the criminal justice systems on both sides of the border, enhance collaboration on efforts to counter cross-border crime, and make our communities safer. We've also had the opportunity to share our experiences and show our efforts to reform our criminal justice systems and their need to be both fair and effective. Again, these are values that we share with our friends and neighbors in the United States. Importantly, as part of our discussions today, we acknowledge the need to address financial crimes that threaten our economies and put the safety of our communities at risk. Crimes such as money laundering, which often occur across national borders and which are becoming increasingly complex. De tels crimes permettent souvent de financer d'autres types d'activités criminelles graves, notamment la contrebande des armes à feu, le passage des clandestins et la production et le trafic de fentanyl, des enjeux prioritaires.
Fentanyl, he's talking about the opioid crisis.
We also recognize the increasing use of virtual currencies to enable these crimes and launder their proceeds, as exposed in a recent Financial Action Task Force report. The use of cryptocurrency to fund illegal activities poses serious challenges to our law enforcement and prosecution officials. We agreed that officials on both sides of the border should explore additional opportunities to collaborate and coordinate their efforts to counter the criminal use of virtual assets. Additionally, we discussed the complexities of criminal justice reform and our ongoing efforts to implement more effective, equitable, and inclusive approaches to community safety, to criminal justice, and to law enforcement. We recognize the importance of ensuring that any new law enforcement measures carefully consider their potential impact on groups who are already overrepresented in the criminal justice system. Je suis convaincu qu'ici, au Canada, nous pouvons rendre nos communautés plus justes et plus sécuritaires en travaillant de concert avec les provinces et territoires et l'ensemble des intervenants dans le système de justice. Pour ce faire, il est essentiel que nous attaquions aux causes profondes de la criminalité, dont les problèmes de santé mentale, les dépendances et l'itinérance. We do not accept that our important work to addressing systemic racism and discrimination in the criminal justice system is in tension with maintaining public safety. The contrary is true. Fairer, more inclusive communities, communities where everyone can access justice, are safer communities. I'm pleased in the year since our last cross-border forum in Washington, D.C., our respective access to justice offices have been working collaboratively to strengthen confidence in our justice systems. Ensuring access to justice is one of the most pressing issues we face in modernizing and transforming our justice systems. Les obstacles à un traitement équitable.
So, there you have that. A new deal. We'll see how effective it is. Another piece of information that was sent to me today that I thought was sort of interesting was Canada's ranking on the international corruption scale. It's ranked from 0 to 100, with 0 being the best, meaning there would be no corruption at all. Or I'm sorry, 0 being the worst, meaning it's a very corrupt country, or 100 being very, very good. Canada is moving in the wrong direction based on the study and the information provided. Scored this year 74 out of 100. In previous years, you go back just a few years, and Canada was always in the high 80s, 84, even higher, and now 74. Overall ranking in the world, number 14. So keep an eye on that one. Slipping. And I can't help but feel that or think that this war in Ukraine might not have something to do with all of that. What else do we have for you tonight? We have this this story. My goodness. Drag queen story time comes to my town. It's going everywhere. So brace yourself, because soon it will be in your town too, and in your school board. So today was a professional development day for the, I believe, the Lambton Kent District School Board, which is in my neck of the woods. And the teachers spent their professional development day preparing for drag queen story time and then engaging in these workshops that are all diversity focused, LGBTQS plus focused. This is what they were discussing today. Drag story time and the bookkeeper was the first workshop in room 1011. What else was on the agenda? The archives teaching queer history. how to teach queer history. Diversity Ed, Safer Spaces Canada. That was another workshop. Storybook LGBTQIA plus and found puppetry. Gender diversity with Jacob Evoy. Gender affirming classroom with Hunter Johnson. Supporting neurodivergent students. I don't even know what a neurodivergent student is. I guess I need to become more educated. Unlearn.com. What is that? Unlearn.com. Let's find out. Let's go to the website. Unlearn.com. Here we go. I found it. This is as new to me as it is to you, folks. This is what teachers were unlearning today, or they were learning how to unlearn and learning about unlearn.com. Inspire positive change. Our goal is to create an environment that celebrates our differences and promotes collaboration, innovation, and growth. Better dialogue by design. Poster packs. This must have been the organization that put the workshops on. So apparently, obviously there will be a drag queen storytime event or something. There's stuff coming up, I guess. And you know what that means? More screaming and fighting. I can't imagine that's not going to happen here, just like it's happening everywhere. Instead of peaceful coexistence, I think we're going to get a lot more turmoil. So that's the unlearn.com website. Here's workshops for students, educators, organizations, and communities. Our workshops help individuals explore various equity issues and examine how they can be reinforced by the media, their experiences, and their relationships. Their approach: in our sessions, we explore the mechanisms that can be used to interrupt bias, stereotypes, and discrimination by challenging the societal norms that marginalize others. We take participants on an in-depth journey through the concept of unlearning by examining our unconscious biases, beliefs, and conditioning. Education programs. Unlearn is passionate about inspiring critical thinking by design in educators, students, and communities. They have corporate workshops as well. So basically, look at all the organizations that use this group. This is the City of Waterloo, the Peel District School Board, the Toronto District School Board, Shell Canada. Oh yes, I know they're pretty woke. Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, Government of Canada, Wellington Catholic School Board, Guelph Black Heritage Society, Rowe, Ontario, Halton District School Board, Oregon Tech, District School Board of Niagara, Ontario Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, the Thames Valley District School Board, which is just up the road from here. CJI, Imagine a Just Community, St. John's Christian Nursery School, York Region District School Board, Ottawa Catholic School Board. Murals. It says here, our wall and floor murals are the perfect visual tool for everyone, stimulating social and emotional learning in educational and corporate workspaces. Topics include racism, equity, gender stereotypes, mental health, inclusion, bullying, and more. So they have pre-made posters that you can put up in your school. I see. So it just keeps coming and fast every day now. I can't believe how quickly all this is ramped up. At least we're getting a lot more coverage. I'm not sure that there's any more of this, but we're certainly getting a lot more coverage, which makes it seem like there's a whole lot more. And we're getting more protests on both sides, which makes it seem like there's more of it. But it's been around for quite a while. People are just becoming more aware. It's social engineering. I think, if I was in charge, I probably wouldn't have this stuff in the schools. I'd be, of course, working to have everybody get along, but telling people what to think or re-educating them by having them unlearn seems a little bit authoritarian to me in the worst sense. But maybe that's just me. Government. We could use a lot less of it.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now, at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program. For your mind.
Okay, so we're back, and the U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, they issued a statement yesterday to address the seizure of an oil tanker that had been commissioned by Chevron, and it was on its way to Texas. And it was has been boarded and seized by Iranian forces. The Iranians are saying that the vessel ran into another ship, and that's why they boarded the tanker and seized it. This is not the first time this has happened. There is ongoing conflict and controversy. This happened not between the United States, NATO, Iran, of course. And I think in the past few years, probably since about 2019, if memory serves me correctly, the Iranians have seized about 6 vessels. In this manner, they tended to use helicopters to land and then seize the vessels. The United States has done the same thing, though. It was only about 3 months ago, I think, that the United States seized a tanker and took all the oil from the Iranians. So these, both sides are engaging in this kind of activity. And today they released new video, which I do not have here queued up, folks, but there is video of the Iranian forces boarding the vessel. But the U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, U.S. 5th Fleet, did issue this statement, and I'll read this to you. From the Gulf of Oman at approximately 1:15 p.m. On the 27th of April, this was yesterday, Marshall Islands flagged oil tanker Advantage Suite was seized by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, IRGCN, while transiting international waters in the Gulf of Oman. The oil tanker issued a distress call during the seizure. U.S. Fifth Fleet is monitoring the situation. Iran's actions are contrary to international law and disruptive to regional security and stability. The Iranian government should immediately release the oil tanker. Iran's continued harassment of vessels and interference with navigational rights in regional waters are a threat to maritime security and the global economy. In the past 2 years, Iran has unlawfully seized at least 5 commercial vessels sailing in the Middle East. So they're saying 5. I thought it was 6. We'll go with them. They live and breathe the stuff, I guess. So 5 on that side. I don't remember how many the U.S. has seized. So it's a tit for tat game going on. A lot of it is about money, but it's largely politics too. And it's a test. It's always a test to see how far they can go. A test to see who's going to take the next step and try to enforce international law, maritime law even, right? That's why sometimes it's better to have a codified law, because it more clearly defines what the law is. And you always need some enforcement mechanism. But when you're talking about international law, enforcement generally comes down to who has the biggest or the most guns and what countries are going to back up what other countries. So it's a very dicey situation because each of these countries, Iran is a sovereign country. The United States is a sovereign country. Canada is a sovereign country. It is. And as a sovereign country, each country kind of gives the other country the middle finger and says, we're sovereign. You have no jurisdiction over us. We're in international waters. We will do as we please. What are you going to do about it? And that's why this is so volatile, so potentially dangerous, because we already have escalation in Ukraine. We have this escalating friction between NATO, the United States, and Iran already. Not very good relations to begin with. And now this. So you never know what the spark might be that might ignite something a lot bigger. And something like this, you know, it happened yesterday. There was a little bit of mention of it, not a whole lot, but now it's ramping up. And why? Because the Iranians released video. If people can't see it today, it probably just didn't happen. It certainly didn't happen in their minds. And you need to manufacture consent. Or, depending on what your objective is through the information war, you might be trying to get people agitated, angry, upset, whatever the motivation is, whatever the objective is. You need video today to really make things work. That's why they've released the video. It's not like a public service to the news media. They're releasing it because they want people to see it. It's their way, honestly, of showing the world that the United States does not have jurisdiction over Iran. Saying, no, we're a sovereign country. Look what we're doing. We're enforcing international law ourselves. What are you going to do about it, you S of A? And the answer is, well, here's some footage here. Footage for you of the tanker being seized. Again, I think this, let me see. No, this is old footage. Let me find the good stuff. I want to show you the good stuff. Here we go. Here we go. All right. This is from Yahoo. This is their version. We'll give them credit for this, but you need to see this. So we will share this little clip because it comes direct from Iran. It was originally broadcast on Iranian television, and that is the actual source for this clip. From the Iranian Navy. Gun sticking up the side of the chopper. And there you see they're calling them commandos. Down they go, down the rope and on board. And apparently nobody are injured, nobody shot, nothing like that. They just seized the vessel, and the crew is all okay. But the United States is saying, release that ship. Bound for Texas with the right kind of oil, because the refineries in Texas refine specific types of crude oil. Each refinery around the world, is set up to refine specific kinds of crude. And yeah, that's what was going on. Kind of crazy when you think about it, because Texas being oil rich, right? They're importing oil from the Middle East. So that's the way it goes today. What else do I have for you? The J6 story. J6 political prisoner Thomas Smith is camping in a park because he can't afford a hotel during his trial. This is a story from the Gateway Pundit. Came across this earlier today. I thought it was telling. So according to this article, it says it's clear at this point from hours of video footage released from January 6th that the violence and rioting, in quotation marks, started that afternoon after Capitol Police and DC Police began their firing their weapons indiscriminately on the tens of thousands of Trump supporters, including men went, well, I'm not sure that that's entirely accurate either. It is also clear that there were hundreds of undercover government operatives working inside the crowds that day. Hundreds of undercover government operatives. I'm not sure that's accurate. I'm sure there were some there, but hundreds, maybe. Don't know. We'll probably never know. So there's Thomas and his cousin Donnie Wren. They traveled to Washington, D.C. to stand with Trump after they watched the 2020 election. I'm not going to repeat that or we'll get banned. But anyway, he's living in a park because he got no money. And he's in Washington for his trial. So very interesting. Media on both sides question it all, question the details, question the facts, which may not be facts. They may be opinion, they may be exaggeration, they may be complete fabrication. Question, question, question. And when claims are made, like hundreds of undercover government operatives I don't know. Do you know? Does the person who wrote that article really know? I don't know. I don't know how many were there. I have no doubt that there were some. Of course there were. Look at what the event was. Look at all the people. Look at the political environment. Of course there were operatives in there. But hundreds? Or were there dozens? Maybe there were thousands. I don't know. I'll tell you this. Whoever wrote that doesn't know either. They're just saying that because maybe they believe it. Maybe they're just making it up. Maybe it is a case where, we used to joke in the newsroom. It was a joke back in the day. That's probably still is today. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Right? Where is the truth today? I don't know. But we keep on working here trying to get you closer to it. And that's why I just don't accept anything at face value anymore. Nothing from anybody on any side. I just don't. Sorry, I'm not here to cheerlead. not for everybody. I want to know, is it true? And I'm going to keep on asking questions. Which also gets me to today's NCI hearing, which is still ongoing right now in Red Deer, Alberta. They're wrapping things up there. Probably another hour or two of testimony to come out of Red Deer Day 3. And it has been, I think, a very productive 3 days. 3 days that, in some respects, should help the public get closer to the truth, at least in Canada, maybe around the world. Because the National Citizens Inquiry is giving a voice to people who previously have not had an adequate voice in the wake of the government response to the pandemic in Canada. And what are some of the highlights over the past few days? Well, we saw lawyer Catherine Christensen, who represents veterans and Canadian military personnel. She's a lawyer, and she testified yesterday about memos that had been distributed from senior military officers, government officials, indicating that they were well aware that informed consent was not really being addressed with the government mandates as they applied to Canadian Armed Forces personnel. And so she was one of the people who testified. And then this information has also come out this week that Chief of Defense Staff Wayne Eyre, who was acting in the position at that time and later implemented a vaccine mandate for Canadian Armed Forces members, was aware of this. It was sent to him in a memo. So this was an ethical question, an ethical issue that the Canadian Armed Forces, senior administrators, senior officers, government, they were aware of it. It was something they looked at, but they just pushed ahead and implemented these mandates anyway. Truly what this means is that informed consent was just basically ignored. It wasn't really part of the equation, even though there were memos that showed some of the people involved were against mandatory vaccinations, especially given that at the time, Canadian Armed Forces uptake on the vaccine had already approached somewhere around 90%, and yet they were going to push to get the remaining 10% vaccinated by making it mandatory. And informed consent, a big issue here. And we heard today at the NCI hearing that from a physician who also expressed concern about the way informed consent has suddenly become barely a consideration. He made it clear he's having difficulty navigating the ethics of his profession now, because informed consent basically went out the window during the pandemic as a cornerstone of ethical behavior for physicians. And in his testimony today, he said, it should not have been trucks parked on Parliament Hill during the Freedom Convoy. He said it should have been doctors there with their Mercedes Benzes and their Audis and their Porsche SUVs, and should have been those guys protesting, in his view, simply because of the ethical issues that were being challenged and ignored in many cases during the pandemic. And indeed, I think still are. But he said, in his words, and I'm paraphrasing, that the cars, the fancy cars, ended up being more important for a lot of the doctors instead of doing the right thing. And I can certainly see that, because he also pointed out that at the beginning, a few doctors did stand up and oppose the government, and they ended up having their heads chopped off, figuratively speaking. They lost their licenses, or they were severely reprimanded. So there was all of that, and the NCI continues even tonight. In Red Deer, it'll be wrapping up shortly. The entire day of testimony, the past 3 days, available on our website. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, the first day we had technical problems and we were not able to broadcast. But yeah, we were popping in and out with the call-in show today a couple of times during the NCI, during the breaks. And you can watch all of it on our Rumble channel, where you can still subscribe, where we are growing. We certainly appreciate everybody that is moving over there and subscribing to us. We're getting real traction over on Rumble. You can also support the channel, not just by subscribing on our Rumble channel, but also by donating at freedomreporters.com. We certainly could use the support to continue the work we're doing here. And you can also donate through Give, Send, Go at maverickdonations.com. You can still subscribe on YouTube too. We're not abandoning YouTube, but we're being suppressed there in a pretty serious way. Nevertheless, we have the bulk of our subscribers over there. You can still subscribe. That still helps us. Please like the video if you haven't done that already. Give us a big thumbs up and hit the notification bell. If you do subscribe, that'll make sure you're aware of every new video that we put out. And if you're over on Facebook, please share, share, share. And we will continue to expand out onto other platforms. That is a big part of what we're doing to combat suppression, to combat the effects of Bill C-11, which has now passed the Senate and is becoming law in Canada and has been signed, I guess, by the Governor General already, as I understand it. The legislation finally, after, lengthy debate over the past few years, the Online Streaming Act will take effect. I know a lot of people are very worried about it, portrayed as a censorship bill by the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre, who is the new CPC leader. A lot of people have very, very serious concerns about what it means, and I know that it will mean additional suppression of independent voices, because it will force the social media companies to favor the mainstream media outlets in the search engine algorithm. And it will give additional powers to the Canadian Radio Telecommunications Commission to begin treating the online environment, communities, more like they do television and radio stations. It will also compel the social media giants to pay the mainstream media outlets and the bigger creators like that. I'm going to be studying it in more detail. There's also an aspect to it which is, I think, quite concerning, because it addresses what we saw just a short time ago on this broadcast, the issue of the woke issue of gender equality. And it also has a statement in there in the legislation itself that makes it a goal, or maybe even mandatory, for creators to promote inclusivity and gender-based ideology. So if you come out, I would say, and based on what I've read, if your content runs contrary to the government led pro LGBTQS plus, and I can't keep all the letters. Even the people in the community can't keep the letters straight, if you've noticed. But if you run contrary to that, I think you're going to maybe run afoul of the law, and that could get you into a heap of trouble. As a creator, I don't know yet. I don't like what I'm seeing. I'm not as concerned as some others because I think it's more about the money than anything else, but it's also about social engineering. And I think it's going to be an attempt by the government to try to bring creators, even creators like myself and others who collaborate with me here, over here into the government lane to try to make you produce content that is in alignment with their political and social engineering ideologies. And if you don't, they will either suppress you, delete you, or maybe even reprimand you through the legal process. I don't know. And it won't be just YouTube, even channels, even platforms like Rumble will, and Twitter. I think they'll be under the thumb of government now. I mean, if they pass these rules, pass laws, Elon Musk can sit there and say, we're free speech and we're for this and we're for that. But if the government passes a law, the companies have no choice. They must comply, or they won't be allowed to operate in the country. And that will include TikTok as well, which we're seeing in the States, in the US. They're looking at banning TikTok. Now, that's as much for security concerns as anything else. Although I have to wonder sometimes, and especially in this case, is it really about security issues? Are they really worried that the Chinese or government, the people's, are they really worried that TikTok is a national security threat? Or is it something else? Is it a money thing? Is it a competition thing? I'm not sure. Political thing? I mean, I kind of get it. I suppose all that data flows back to China, the Chinese government, Communist Party of China. And they can use that data in a wide variety of ways to learn about U.S. culture, U.S. politics. They can monitor messages. I suppose it could represent a threat. But maybe they just don't like it because they're not the ones in control of it. Twitter, Elon Musk has revealed, has been very much a tool of the deep state, if you will, of government, of the CIA. They've been using it in foreign countries to orchestrate, choreograph color revolutions to overthrow governments, coups to manipulate the masses to get them out into the streets to protest. That's what they were doing with Twitter in a number of countries. It isn't just an issue of spying on us here domestically, which is a big concern. When all the Twitter files were released and all that information came out, a lot of that was, people focused on the issues domestically, but I think even an even greater concern is what the government was doing and probably still is doing with these social media platforms, including Twitter, even under Elon Musk. Don't kid yourself, man. Do you think that he's put a complete end to the U.S. government, to NATO, using Twitter as a propaganda information warfare tool? I seriously doubt it. He might be supporting more free speech, using it as more of a free speech platform at home, but abroad, I bet you he's still giving the government access to use that tool to do its work around the world. I suspect he probably doesn't have much choice. because while he has some control over what goes on with Twitter, the government has more, because they can regulate him into oblivion if they want to. That's the reality, especially when it comes to international law as it relates to social media. What protections are there for a company like Twitter? And that opens a whole other cornucopia of questions. Who's in charge? What is the law as it pertains to, say, Twitter in international waters? What happens with Twitter in a foreign country? Who controls Twitter in Iran? Is it the Iranian government? I suppose it is. But what about the U.S. influence there? And is the U.S. or is Canada engaging in foreign influence at that point of other elections or the political process? Of course they are. And how does international law play into all of that? I guess these social media companies, even though they're, able to leapfrog from one country to another, borders don't mean anything, everything is digital, it's going all over the globe. These laws become sort of gray, don't they? As one area of jurisdiction bleeds into another. And that's why I pointed out here when we were dealing with some hacking issues, and when we were talking and laying out the story about the hacking of the Give Send Go account for the truckers. And in my conversation the one night that I had with Scott Ritter about how hacking is done internationally now, so that your rights can be violated without risk of penalty to the governments that are actually doing it, because they basically outsource the hacking to someone out of the country where there's no legal jurisdiction over the hacker. So I can tell you too that I don't want to get into it on a personal level here and what's been going on with me, but that's what they do. In order to avoid going to jail themselves, these hackers have teams and they have a leader, and the leader will get a collaborator in another country to hack into say if it's somebody's website in the United States or a government website even, they'll hack into that website, but do it from outside the country. What are you going to do about it? Even if they detect it at that point? And I'm not sure that our legislation has been able to keep up with it. I'm certain that it hasn't. Heck, I mean, you look at the debate that they had in the Senate, especially the Senate, where the senators tend to be a little bit on the older side. When they were having discussions about Bill C-11, a lot of them just clearly did not understand what it was about at all. And they talk about the algorithm that Google uses, and they're like clueless. They don't even really know what an algorithm is. They didn't understand how search engines work. They were clueless. And yet these are the people that are being tasked with deciding whether legislation that affects the internet, censorship, ethics, how the technology is being used or will be used in the future for decades to come. They're the ones tasked with deciding whether this legislation should be passed or not. And they're kind of clueless on it. I think that in itself is kind of dangerous. Pierre Poilievre tonight vowing to roll that legislation back, take that law and rescind it if elected the next Prime Minister of Canada. Received, one of his mass emails tonight, and that is the topic of discussion, or that was the topic of the email coming out. So they're still on that issue, the Conservatives are. But as I said yesterday, I don't entirely, I just don't buy the whole virtue signaling thing coming from the Conservatives either. They're portraying it as a censorship issue. I think as much as anything else, though, for the Conservatives, it's about money. I think they are sort of, without saying it out loud, they're on the side of the big tech companies. And they're saying, no, it's new technology. Just leave well enough alone. These big tech companies should not be forced to pay the mainstream traditional legacy media news outlets like CBC, Global, CTV. Shouldn't have to pay them, because that's what the legislation does. And then on the other side, you have the Liberals who have already paid off the mainstream legacy media outlets, television, radio stations, newspapers, and they're saying, oh, no, we're going to make a law and big tech's going to have to pay for the content that these guys are producing and putting online. So I think those are the real two places to look for the battle lines being drawn. That's where it was drawn. And the Conservatives have been wrapping it all up with the censorship issue. But I think, honestly, that's sort of like a secondary issue within all of that. That's the way they play it out, but it's more about the money. They're not, I don't think the Conservatives are necessarily looking out for the interests of the average Canadian because they're good. They're the good guys. There may be some legitimacy in their virtue signaling, I guess, certainly. But the money, it's all about the money, because it's always about the money. And the mainstream media, even the independent media reporting on this, I've listened to a lot of the independents, especially, talk about this issue, and I don't think a lot of them just don't really understand it. They're just regurgitating the other narrative, on the Liberal NDP pro Bill C-11 side. It's been, we have to do this to protect Canadian producers and protect the Canadian broadcasting infrastructure in this new media, and we got to support producers. That's what we have to do. Yeah, it's all about Canadian content and preserving Canadian, well, I'd say culture, except that Justin Trudeau says Canada doesn't have any true culture anymore. But that's on that side. And then on the other side, it's all been about censorship. But that's because Pierre Poilievre is very good at simplifying narratives in order to solicit support from the public and generate support. And he's done that in a pretty effective way. But if you read the bill, the truth is kind of in the middle, and it really comes down to the dollars and the cents. Stick with me. I got more right after this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Attention, U.S. citizens who want socialized health care. A personal message from Rick Walker at Maverick News. My dog gets better health care than I do. This is an important message, a news flash from the producer, the executive producer, president, CEO, and official garbage taker-outer at Maverick News. That would be me. It's true. My dog gets better health care than I do. We have a tradition of socialized healthcare in Canada. And I've had concerns about it for years, really since the 80s. That's when in this province they capped doctors' wages and the problems really began to appear. That's because so many doctors then just up and left the country, or at least left the province, and a lot of them just left the country at that point. That was when we had Premier David Peterson, who made that an election issue. And at the time, I was young and I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Those doctors make too much money anyway. And that's what he appealed to, was that these greedy doctors, we need to stop it. Ironically, David Peterson was a liberal. Strangely, ironically. Anyway, and I kind of liked him. He was kind of a conservative, business-oriented liberal, though, in those days. Politics was a little different. Anyway, my dog gets better health care than I do. And it's true. This week, I thought my dog was going to die. My dog, Cosmo, border collie, love that dog. He's with me all the time. When I'm doing the show, he's upstairs waiting for me by the door. He'll just sit there for hours and wait. But he got so sick because he likes to steal things, especially socks and stuffed animals and whatever he can kind of find to tease you with, but he'll steal stuff. And he ate something. I think it might have been a sock. I don't know. But anyway, he ate this stuff and it was a problem. And so he got pretty sick. So I had to take him to the vet. But, I called the vet and told them what was going on in the morning. And they said, well, that's fine, Mr. Walker. You can bring Cosmo in. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get him in until about 3:00 this afternoon. And I said, well, that's just fine. No problem. And then I thought to myself, I called them. It was about 9 a.m. They had just opened up over there. 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. So that's a 6-hour wait. If you go to an emergency room, pretty much anywhere in Canada, and including in Ontario, the recent studies show you could be in for a 20-hour wait. 20 hours. It's true. A lot of people, when they get really sick, or if they even have a busted bone, they avoid going because they have to sit there so long. And my dog went to see the same vet that he always sees, Dr. Emily. And Dr. Emily knows Cosmo very well. Knows him by name, knows him by sight, knows him by his file, has all his history. He is our family dog doctor. And Dr. Emily took care of my Springer Spaniel before she passed away. Had her for a long time. Miss her too. And she got better care than I did. And so I took Cosmo in, and Cosmo had definitely eaten some stuff that was causing some serious problems, and very lethargic. And he was in some pretty serious trouble. But anyway, the doc fixed Cosmo up with some medications, and we took care of it. And within about 3 days, Cosmo was now he's back to his old self. He was for a while far too well behaved and far too easy to walk. Because if he's well behaved and easy to walk, there's something seriously wrong, because he's usually so full of energy that he's bouncing off the walls. And when I walk him 4 and 5 times a day, he's usually tackling my legs, hanging on like a little kid making you drag him down the street when he wraps his legs around my leg. I think it's funny and I don't care. So I'm quite happy to let him do that. When he's not doing it, when he wasn't doing it, I knew there was something wrong. So the point being, I got Cosmo in there in just a matter of hours, an emergency visit. The doc took him in, assessed him, came up with, a strategy, prescribed some medications, which I didn't even have to go to a doggy pharmacy or anything. They were right there. So I got the meds over the counter, like right from the veterinary clinic. And I was told if we want to do an x-ray, we can do it right now, or we can wait until tomorrow. But that was available immediately as well. You know how long you'd have to wait to get an x-ray? Like if even an emergency, right? Could be a day, 2. If you go to a walk-in clinic as a human, you'd have to make an appointment to get an x-ray for something, and that could take weeks. If you need to see a specialist, it could be a year before you get in to see one. I'm not joking. In some cases, it could be a year and a half or 2 years before you get to see a specialist. If I ate a sock and then I had to go to emergency, I would be there for hours and in agonizing pain. And they would just say, sit over there till your name is called. And I don't even have a family doctor, but my dog's got a family doctor, a family doggy veterinarian. Gets in within hours. Meds available right then and there. Need an x-ray? Available on site, on demand. Now, did I pay out of pocket? Yeah, we paid out of pocket. Was it at an exorbitant fee? No, not really. Not especially not when you consider what the service was. It was like $240. And that included the visit and the meds and special food and there was like some probiotics and stuff too that came with it. All that for $240. Probably saved the dog's life. Not a bad deal. And if he'd needed x-rays or surgery, that could have been done right away too. I just thought, wow, if only I could get that level of care as a human being in Canada under our socialized healthcare system, which is tapped out. You get good care if you can get it, if you can get access. But the waiting lists are so long. So I don't know if that's news, but I think it is reality. A story worth telling and sharing because it gives you it gives you a way to compare, right? The way we treat our pets versus the way we treat our humans. And I'll tell you this, you can buy pet insurance for veterinarian clinic, for veterinarians. So if we'd had insurance, I don't know, it was an emergency, but for certain situations, the insurance would cover the cost of even major surgeries and things like that. So that's all available too. And that even makes me think about dentists. If you have an employer and they give you a plan, you can get exceptional dental care in this country. And the way I've seen dentists work, it seems to work fairly well. And a lot of dentists, even though we up until now have not had really socialized dental care, and US viewers, listeners, please take note. A lot of you think that everything here is free, and that is not true. Our dental care, not free. Medications, not free. However, for the less fortunate, there are programs in place in Canada that, go above and beyond the government socialized healthcare system. I know that dentists, many of them, will actually run free clinics from time to time to provide free dental care for people in need in many communities. That happens quite often. Not to say that they're compelled and that people don't fall through the cracks or maybe don't know or aren't knowledgeable of these things, and so maybe aren't able to avail themselves of those services, but that stuff does go on. But now in Canada, we have dental services being socialized, and that comes through the last federal budget, through pressure being applied by the New Democratic Party, which is propping up the Liberal government. They insisted upon it. I even take issue with all of that stuff. And you know why? Because it really, here's the little dirty secret. Right now, if you have a job, you have a medical plan that covers dental, the corporation, your employer, they pay for that. They buy health insurance packages through insurance companies, and they make those packages available to their employees as part of your remuneration, your wage. They build that into the cost of their labor. But when the government steps in and they start providing these services for like children or whomever, and it becomes more and more universal, it relieves the companies of that burden. So it actually puts money back into the pockets of the big companies. Well, they tell you that they're helping you. And I suppose for some people it is helpful. But it isn't just about you. The biggest winner in all of it is the big corporations. And they're getting that cash, or maybe not straight up cash, but they're being relieved of that burden, the burden of compensating their employees with healthcare benefits by the very socialists who criticize them and demonize them. And there is another example of how everything in our world right now is actually upside down and not as it appears.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
So here's another issue that I kind of focused on when I was a journalism student. I was part of a group, and we produced this group documentary when I was in journalism school. And it focused on the issue of cameras in courtrooms. At the time, there was a push on, and there was actually a trial that was run. And what I mean by trial, I mean like a test where they put cameras into a courtroom in Canada to see what the impact would be. And that, as a result, it resulted in us doing a documentary about that subject. And that documentary, incidentally, it went on. It was entered into a festival, a competition for journalism students across the country, and we was a finalist, and then we got our butts kicked by students at Ryerson. They always won everything. Whatever, Ryerson Polytechnic Institute. So. Good journalism school. But anyway, the reason I bring this up is this is an issue that is being dealt with now in the U.S. A bipartisan group of senators is optimistic about a push to allow cameras in federal courtrooms. And this is from CBS News. Let me just bring this up. It caught my attention, especially because I did this documentary with these other journalism students back in the day, and it's an interesting subject, and there are a lot of issues that surround it. Anyway, this story reads, amid a torrent of high-profile cases, including more than 1,000 prosecutions stemming from the January 6th attack on the Capitol, a bipartisan group of senators said they are optimistic about the prospects of new legislation to allow camera access inside America's federal courts. The federal court system, including nearly 100 U.S. district courts and approximately a dozen courts of appeals, prohibit the use of video cameras during proceedings. The prohibition means the public can't watch criminal and civil trials from anywhere outside a courthouse, leaving some of the highest stakes cases in America out of view. Senator Charles Grassley, a Republican from Iowa who has championed legislation to end the court system's camera prohibition for years, told CBS News the prospects of passing legislation to allow recording have improved in recent years, and a bill might have sufficient votes for approval in this Congress. So, like I said before, with the Iranians releasing the video on the ship, if people can't see video, it's almost like an event never happened. If a tree falls in the forest, but there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? In this day and age, if you don't see the court proceedings, if you're not able to tune in and watch, did the trial even really happen? Of course it did. And yes, you see in Canada, you're not allowed to bring cameras into the courtroom. That's why you see, depending on the jurisdiction and what the regulations or rules are surrounding the use of cameras in courtrooms, you'll see courtroom sketches. That's because you're not allowed to put cameras into that particular courtroom. These are serious, they're serious issues that come up as a result of that. Personally, I'm very much in favor of putting cameras into courtrooms because I think it provides much greater transparency. It helps the public understand the legal system because they can watch it in real time. Most people don't have time and they're not inclined to go and spend their days sitting in a courtroom. And I think in Canada especially, people don't understand how the system works because they're not exposed to it unless they're criminals or unless they're charged with something. And they have to go down there and deal with the hassle of, fighting a ticket for speeding or something. So if you allow people to watch it on like a court TV channel or whatever, I mean, like real court proceedings, not like entertainment-based reality TV show, Judge Judy kind of thing. I mean, real court. You let people watch it and they begin to understand the system more. Now, of course, depending on the court, in some courts in the U.S., cameras are allowed. And I think that's sometimes a good thing too. But it does have an impact on the way proceedings progress. You put a camera into a courtroom and suddenly the lawyers and even the people providing testimony, they will play to that camera. It does affect things. It results in theater, dramatization. No question about it. And it also changes the dynamics because the lawyers have an opportunity then to play on the public's emotions and feed them information in order to try to build public support or sympathy for their client if they're the defense counsel, or in the case of the Crown or the prosecution, the opposite, to demonize and to get the public to view a case in a particular way. And then politics can also come into play there, where it can be used as a platform by those testifying or even the lawyers themselves, who maybe even have, in some cases, their own motives or agendas. Maybe they want to build a career and they, by being dramatic, have the attention focused on them during what essentially becomes a television show. And they can build their profile and build a bigger career, a bigger client base, charge more money for subsequent cases that come up because they become something of a celebrity. So these are issues that are serious. They all raise very serious ethical issues. In Canada, I think we've gone too far the other way. I became very frustrated, especially in the latter years of working in mainstream television, because in Canadian courts now, as a matter of routine, you get publication bans. The judges do it for a variety of reasons. It's to preserve the integrity of investigations. It's to also make it to prevent defense from saying that a proper jury can't be found, that an unbiased jury can't be found because there's been too much media attention in a particular community, and then they would have to move a trial to a different community because of all the reporting that is done, some of which may not be complete or accurate because the reporters, the journalists don't have all of the information because not all of the evidence has been presented. And yet, on the opposite side of that, what I've been witnessing, especially over the past 3 years, as it relates to, say, the incarceration of people arrested because of participation in freedom protests, or even the convoy, or these guys out in Coots who are facing all those weapons charges and have now been in jail, I think, over 400 days without a trial. There's a publication ban on all of that stuff. And so on the other side, and we heard this today from someone giving testimony at the National Citizens Inquirer, I think it was Chris Scott, the owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe, who made reference to the 4 defendants in the Coots case. He just proclaimed them as innocent. He said they're just innocent. That was his statement. But we don't know. Not really, because we don't have all the evidence. I mean, if you're on the freedom side and you pick that side, you automatically are taking the position, oh yeah, they're innocent. Absolutely. And if you're on the other side where you're on the woke, we hate freedom side, then you're taking the other position, which is nope. They're guilty. But the truth is we don't have the evidence because it hasn't been released yet. Not all of it. We've seen the pictures. In fact, I have pictures of that particular case, of that gun cache that they allege came from the Coots 4. They put that picture out, which you may remember. But we don't have the testimony from the officers. We don't have all of the information surrounding this to have full context on what this is all about. So we don't know. All we know is the police rolled this out. This was a photo op for the media. But you put cameras into a courtroom, and that allows the people to see everything that happens. And I would say that even if there is grandstanding by witnesses or lawyers or even a judge, so be it. It may skew things, but I'd rather have that level of transparency, that level of accountability, really. Because then you also get education and you get firsthand accounts by the public. They can see the system at work. And they can see whether the system is working properly or whether it is corrupt, whether a judge is acting fairly or not fairly. You're not relying simply on a mainstream media journalist or someone like myself or someone else who has the time or has the job to go and sit in a courtroom and take in the testimony and sit through a trial. You don't have to rely on their perspective because everybody brings a perspective. And you still get their perspective. You get the journalist's take on it. And maybe multiple journalists with different perspectives. But isn't it better for you to be able to see the whole thing if there's a camera there? Maybe there are instances when cameras are not warranted. In particular, if there's a murder case or a rape case, and you need to protect the identity of someone for some reason, for compassionate reasons, maybe it isn't good to have a camera in a courtroom. But judges should have the ability, the latitude to make a call like that and say, no, we're not putting a camera in for this particular case or at this particular part of the case. During this witness, we're not going to have the camera. I don't know. These are all questions that have to be grappled with. But it just really piqued my interest to see this and this happening, in the aftermath of the J6 incident. And it goes on here in this article and says, despite growing optimism from its co-sponsors, hurdles remain for its passage. Securing time on the Senate floor for debate and proceedings is a challenge for most legislation, even for proposals with widespread support. As of Friday, the Sunshine in the Courtroom Act had secured 5 co-sponsors. A number of high-stakes legislative showdowns and deadlines, including a looming fight over raising the debt ceiling, which we talked about yesterday, or the day before, means there is less time and bandwidth for other measures. A separate bill to require cameras in the Supreme Court has less favorable prospects and faces strident opposition from at least some of the justices themselves. In his annual report on the federal judiciary in 2022, Chief Justice John Roberts did not address the ongoing efforts to allow camera access in courthouses. Roberts' office not commenting so far today on this subject. Keep an eye on it. I'm hopeful. I would like to see more cameras in courtrooms, especially in Canada, because, and as a final note on this subject, Canadians are bombarded by U.S. media. It's always been the case. It dominates here. Regardless of what part of Canada you live in, I would say much of the world is dominated by U.S. media because it's so powerful, so big. We get all the U.S. channels, but on the U.S. side, you don't get all the Canadian channels. No, you don't. But on the Canadian side, we get all the U.S. stuff, all the networks, all the specialty channels, and we get all the information on U.S. courts. So Canadians, by and large, when it comes to matters of law, are very confused. When it comes to matters of politics, Canadians are very confused. They don't know. Most Canadians I speak to don't understand how the system works at all. They don't understand how the legal system works or the political system because they mix it up. They get a little Canadian stuff in there and they get a little US stuff in there because they watch a lot of court TV, which is all US. They watch a lot of primetime television. They watch a lot of Law and Order, which is US law. They watch a lot of US politics. They watch a little bit of Canadian politics. The two systems are very different and people don't get it. They don't really understand. Even the Premier of Alberta, the new Premier, Danielle Smith, was a little confused about possibly being able to issue a pardon for Pastor Arthur Pawlowski, who was charged during the pandemic, facing a bunch of charges. And she had spoken during her leadership bid to take over the United Conservative Party of Canada. Even she was confused. She didn't quite get it right. She was sort of saying she's going to give, amnesty to people who are charged or suggesting that she might do that. But then when she was in power and she consulted with the Justice Department, the legal experts within her own government, they informed her that, no, you can't really do that. It doesn't work like that in Canada. It's not like, in the US where the president just pardons someone. The Premier doesn't have that power. In fact, quite the opposite. It is improper for a Premier to get involved. Absolutely improper in any case. And if you do, you're going to get yourself into a heap of trouble. Probably cost you your gig as Premier. Anyway, she didn't cross the line in my estimation. That's another story. But heavy duty issues a lot of ethics, a lot of consequences that might be unintended if they do put cameras in. But you've had enough experience, I think, especially in other courts, at other levels, all through the U.S. system, especially where courts have allowed cameras in. And I think the results overall have been positive. So let's see what happens with it. I'll be right back. Don't go away.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom. Fear not the storm, for truth is on our side. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, let's move on to hunting Nazis. This is a subject that has been coming up from time to time for, over a year now. Since the special military operation from Russia in Ukraine began, and even before, we were discussing this here. As you know, we have had Canadian Armed Forces personnel training soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers. And we've seen reports of Canadian Armed Forces personnel training actual neo-Nazis in Ukraine. It's a fact. Canadian Armed Forces, senior personnel, administrators, people in charge, they have addressed this, some time ago, saying that, they're aware and that they are kind of paid lip service to it. But we know what's really going on. We know that it has happened and it continues to happen. The Azov battalion in particular, seen as being a battalion in Ukraine that has the best fighters, among the best fighters they have in Ukraine. So they're not going to snub those guys. And we know that the U.S., from many reports, has been providing weapons for years, even long before the military conflict, the hot war began in Ukraine. The U.S. was providing weapons that were going directly into the hands of these Nazi battalions. It's a fact, documented, undeniable. We've seen it. But a lot of this stuff goes way back, especially in Canada. Now, we know that Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, has Ukrainian roots. We know that her family collaborated with the Nazis in World War II. Their parents, grandparents there. And there's a picture of our Deputy Prime Minister at a rally here in Canada holding a Banderite banner or scarf, whatever you want to describe it. But that is that's part of a neo-Nazi group from Ukraine. There's a close-up. We've talked about that. There have been other media reports about this. And why is that happening? Well, it's because there's a huge Ukrainian population in Canada. And while Operation Paperclip is probably the most famous of all the programs, especially on the U.S. side, Operation Paperclip was a U.S. operation that allowed thousands of Nazi collaborators to come to the West, to the New World, after World War II. Indeed, it was the United States using Operation Paperclip and recruitment initiatives that brought the rocket scientists to the US, and that is what fueled the NASA space program. It was those rocket scientists from Nazi Germany that really propelled the program and allowed the United States to get to the moon before the Russians in the space race. And I know there are people out there who say we didn't go to the moon. Well, let's just say for tonight that we did. Whether they did. Anyway, Operation Paperclip allowed thousands of Nazis and Nazi collaborators, actual Nazis, to come to the US, where they lived protected lives, essentially. And the CIA and the intelligence community made use of them, especially during the Cold War. We've talked about that. But Canada was heavily involved in that as well. Thousands and thousands of Nazi collaborators after World War II were welcomed into Canada with open arms. It's something that isn't really spoken about much in Canada. It's one of those quiet little unspoken secrets. Most people are not even aware. And there is a festering problem out there, in my view, based on the information that, especially over the last year and a half, the information that keeps bubbling to the surface and finding its way to me. And a lot of this goes back to. Tonight, we're going to start with a look at Nazi monuments, monuments that pay tribute to Nazis in Canada. And there are many of them. Perhaps the most famous is one here in Ontario, in Oakville. And let me bring up a picture of it here for you. Here we go. This one here in a cemetery. And it says on this monument, to those who died for the freedom of Ukraine. And this was vandalized about a year ago, 2 years ago, 2021, I think it was vandalized. It says Nazi War Monument. Somebody spray painted that on it. And it was vandalized. Well, that set off a firestorm. Because Canada doesn't have just one monument like that. It has a bunch. And here we are in 2023, where we have monuments of all kinds being actually torn down. You know, they're toppling statues of Canadian prime ministers. They are tearing down Canadian and U.S. history. And strangely, these monuments, while vandalized from time to time, are not being torn down. And very little attention really overall is being paid to them. It's an interesting and troubling situation. Question is, why isn't something being done about it? And I'm not exactly sure why. It isn't really clear. I think what we do know is I think there are political reasons why more attention hasn't been focused on this, because these monuments in some cases have been there for decades. I think some of it is economic. Some of it, I think, is simply an attempt to sort of just leave well enough alone, not poke a hornet's nest, and just let things simmer. And this is all now boiling up again. It's boiling over. And a lot of it is because of the conflict in Ukraine. It's an issue that honestly has been forced to the surface by none other than Vladimir Putin himself and the Russians. Because he has been, in his speeches, since even long before the special military operation in Ukraine, drawing attention to this, exposing this inconvenient truth for Western leaders in especially Canada and the US, but especially Canada. So I have some notes here. I'm just going to go through. So how did these monuments get set up? Who put them there? Well, you have to think back to World War II. And we sent soldiers over there, thousands during World War II. Thousands of Canadian soldiers went, and many, many, many died fighting the Nazis. And so you have this strange situation where Canada, on the one hand, honors its veterans. It has a history of fighting Nazism. But at the same time, opening its arms after the war and allowing prison guards, Nazi collaborators, straight up Nazis to come into Canada and live lives in peace and sort of in hiding, largely. And all while the Jewish community and even organizations that have been there to support and fight and expose the atrocities of the war, even as Jewish organizations have sort of turned a blind eye to these monuments and even the existence of these Nazis among us. So that's the one that monument in Oakville, that is the one that has, in recent times, especially since about 2021, has been generating the most attention. So it's granite, and it's a memorial to the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, or UPA. And it was, I believe, erected in 1988 in the St. Volodymyr Ukrainian Cemetery in Oakville. There's also a monument to veterans of the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, a military branch of the Nazi Party Waffen SS. The SS division's insignia was added to the memorial after the inauguration. The memorial was vandalized back in 2020. And I showed you the picture of that vandalism, of that sprayed paint job that says Nazi War Monument. And the Russian embassy complained about that very memorial to the Canadian government back in 2017. At which time, it was basically brushed aside. So we have Jewish organizations like B'nai B'rith. They're aware of this. Canadian Polish Congress. And they've called for the removal of the monument. But most of these calls, that the government always seems to find some reason why they can't do anything about it. So Oakville Mayor Rob Burton at the time stated that he would remove the monument, but he can't because municipalities have no right to regulate private cemeteries. Can't do it. Just don't know what to do. There's no law that says they can't have that up. And maybe he's right. It becomes an issue also of free speech, I suppose, doesn't it? But the more important issue is what this does is it does expose a dark side of Canadian society and history, and a dark side of today's reality in the geopolitical climate that we're facing. What other monuments do we have in Canada? We have a statue in Hamilton, Ontario, of Draza Milovovic, a Yugoslav Serb, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly because I sometimes butcher these Slavic names. He was a general during World War II, and he was the leader of the Chetniks, a royalist and Serbian nationalist movement and guerrilla force. And he collaborated with the Nazis following the German invasion of Yugoslavia in 1941. So this one's in Hamilton. I'll bring this up so you can see it. I think most Canadians, if they were walking by this, probably wouldn't think much of it. Few people really take the time to even read these plaques. And it shows, too, that we're talking about just not Nazis from Germany, but Nazi collaborators, right? And in this case, Yugoslavia. So there's that one. There's also a bust of Roman Shukovic in Edmonton. He's a Ukrainian nationalist leader and Nazi collaborator. He was responsible for the ethnic cleansing of Poles and the massacres of Jews. And this monument was erected in 1972 by Ukrainian World War II veterans. It's on private land near the Ukrainian Youth Unity Complex in Edmonton, Alberta. This statue was also vandalized back in 2019. Back then, somebody spray painted the words Nazi scum. I'll bring this up so you can see that. And you can see they also splashed red paint on it. There's a memorial at St. Michael's Cemetery in Edmonton. This one's large. And it reads, "For those who fought for Ukraine's freedom." It was constructed back in 1976 by the former Ukrainian Waffen SS. And it's in St. Michael's Cemetery. And it too was vandalized at one point. And someone spray painted the words Nazi monument to 14th Waffen SS so that people would know what it's really there for, making it very clear and obvious. So the Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center say such painting reflects the actual historical record of people commemorated by the monument. And the Wiesenthal Center has been probably the most vocal and probably the only effective voice out there exposing these connections to Nazism in Canada. other organizations, Jewish organizations in the country, haven't really been that proactive on this stuff. The strange thing is, through all of this, as these things have been exposed, the people exposing the information have largely been attacked, criticized, accused of being Putin puppets, Russian sympathizers. Here's a picture of that monument. And there's the graffiti that was spray painted on it. And there are more too. But those are the ones that draw the most attention. So as I say, in Canada, thousands of Nazis after World War II came to Canada, or Nazi collaborators. And I know that back in the 1980s, I covered a war crimes trial myself involving someone accused of a war crime who was at the time in Yugoslavia. But he was very old. I mean, the alleged crimes took place in the former in Yugoslavia, but he was living in Windsor, Ontario. In the end, the trial never finished because he was so old and so frail and so ill that he fell ill, and the trial was never completed. And he died soon thereafter, after having lived most of his life after the war in Canada in obscurity, flying under the radar. And because he wasn't fully convicted, I'm not going to say his name. But in Canada, this is something that I think warrants more attention. And I'll tell you why in a moment. I think it warrants more attention because Canada has the largest Ukrainian population outside of Ukraine. And there's a huge concentration of that population out west, especially in Alberta. And that's not to say that all the people in the Ukrainian community are Nazis. I'm not saying that. But there is a history there. And what I've seen happening, and I mean observing, so it's not just opinion, but this is information that's coming to me. It's through empirical evidence. There is a rekindling of Nazi ideology within the country, in particular among younger people. And I hate to tell you this, folks, but some of it is percolating from within inside and on the fringes of the freedom movement itself, where vulnerable people are being recruited by people who are not very good people. So one of our contacts out in Alberta, some time back, I have a contact out there, and this person phoned me, and we were having a discussion about a young freedom fighter who seemed like a very well set, very grounded, level-headed lad. But over the course of a year had been taking in speeches from a couple of different groups who had been directing him to some videos online. And over the course of a year, this young person had a change in perspective. until one day the person who was calling me said, and again, I'm not going to use a name because I don't want to single somebody out with something as dark as this when I think it's just a case of being misguided. But this young lad had said that Hitler wasn't such a bad guy. And that was very disturbing. And there are, some videos out there that I've seen that are even up on YouTube that really do lay out pretty convincing arguments for sympathy for someone like Hitler, simply because they point to things like his economic policies, which resulted in rapid economic expansion and recovery following massive inflation and hardship and depression, economic depression for the masses in Germany after World War I. And he seemed to offer a solution to people economically and lifted them out of economic hardship. But my goodness, look at what history is supposed to have taught us. And I can't help but notice that in many respects, we are repeating the mistakes of the past. And why is that happening? Probably because in probably the last 10 years in particular, a lot of this history is just being ignored. I'm not exactly sure why, but things have certainly become twisted. When did it become okay for the Canadian government to send weapons and personnel to train neo-Nazis how to use those weapons? When did it become okay to use our tax dollars for that? We're not supposed to allow that. That's contrary to Canadian policy. And yet, it's happening. And then I went to antihate.ca, which, is run by Bernie Farber, who is, I believe, Jewish. And they have a long thread of articles and information that rightly call out neo-Nazi groups. They have information there that stands against Nazism. I can understand that. But through all of this, I've noticed that they don't seem to be very vocal when it comes to talking about the Nazi battalions in Ukraine. I find it kind of odd, and yet at the same time, when you think about the alignment of antihate.ca, Canadian Anti-Hate Network, with the government, maybe it starts to make sense. Because the Canadian government, just like the US, they're quite happy to use the Nazi battalions to arm them, to train them. So I bring your attention to all of this. I also know that when you go back to the 1980s, and this is when I was first beginning my career as a journalist, there were stories that I touched on from time to time regarding Nazis in Canada. At the time, there was a big push on to expose Nazis who were living in Canada. And at that time, and I'm going back now to about the mid 80s, probably around 84 to 86. And there were studies, surveys, estimations done where they calculated there were somewhere around, and this was an estimate, about 1,000 Nazis still living in Canada at that time that certain groups did want to bring to justice. but they were just never very successful with it. I think in all that time, and I'll bring up more of this information in the days ahead, but I think in all that time, there was only one case that ever really came through. And through that period of time, what the objective really was not to really bring them to justice in Canada, but was to simply to deport them. But the federal government consistently would back away from it, back away from deporting these Nazis, and even look the other way so that these things would not have to come to trial, citing things like provisions in the Constitution that didn't give them the jurisdiction to retroactively prosecute war crimes domestically. And it becomes complicated, but at the time, the federal government was arguing, as these issues were being examined, that the method that would have to be used was that the federal government would have to pass new legislation in order to address the issue of Nazis in Canada so that then they could be prosecuted under the new legislation. And so there was a back and forth at the time, which didn't get much media attention, but there was a back and forth where a decision had to be made on whether it was constitutionally sound for the government to do that, if they had the jurisdiction, if the Constitution actually allowed it. And this was after the implementation and introduction of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which addressed that very issue, I believe, in Section 11. And there were sound arguments to suggest that the government could pass new legislation that would allow prosecution, because there was a provision under, I think, Section B of Section 11, subsection B, which addressed the issue of it. There's a line in there that makes reference to if it was recognized as a crime by other countries, essentially, who are part of the international community, which paves the way for the government to retroactively then prosecute, with the objective being not so much conviction and then imprisonment here, but deportation. And then the issue becomes, are there extradition treaties in place with some of these other countries, like, say, Germany or the former Yugoslavia? And so because this became a constitutional issue, there was a lot of legal wrangling. It gave a lot of these people who had come here, who had worked with the Nazis, a lot of time. And even in the 80s, they were old. A lot of them were very old, because we're talking about 4 decades that had passed at that point after World War II. So they were at the end of their lives. I think that's also partly why the government didn't want to aggressively pursue a lot of this stuff, because the cases, when they would come up, they became quite often a question, the cases that centered around the question of, were the people really fit to stand trial? Were they healthy enough? Were they even of sound mind anymore? A lot of them had developed Alzheimer's disease, or they were senile. So they didn't even really know what was going on. And they were in their 80s, their 90s. But when it comes to war crimes, like the atrocities that were committed by the Nazis, for those who sought justice at the time and even today, it's justice delayed, which has been justice denied. Because those people who committed crimes, many of them managed to escape justice. Most of them are dead. But today, their legacy lives on as dark as it is, that history lives on in those monuments here in Canada and in the minds of some people who picked up on the same ideology, who learned from those people much of the same ideology, the same mindset. They still have some of the same mindset today because it was handed down from one generation to another, from one political power club to another. And it's complicated because it's not just left versus right. It isn't just liberal versus conservative versus freedom fighter versus socialist versus communist versus fascist. It's deeper than that. We've seen a resurgence in a rekindling of, or an attempt to rejuvenate, restore, reuse, repurpose the swastika. I showed you that just some months ago out west. And what did I get back? Some people were like, yeah, that's kind of a problem. But a lot of people were like, you just don't understand. Don't I? Don't I? I don't understand. Yes, I do. I understand that there is this undercurrent that Canadians don't speak of because many are not aware, but there's an undercurrent. It's been there all along. And it flows through our society all the way to Parliament Hill, right into the office of the Deputy Prime Minister. You can make all the excuses you want, and you can put the swastika on any flag you want, call it your own, and say it's not, you just don't understand. I understand. I don't care where you put that swastika. I don't care how you cloak it. I don't care if it's Nazi symbolism on a scarf, a banner, a flag, or if it's just blatant, like right out in the open where people can see it on Ukrainian military officers and soldiers' uniforms. Not just the swastika, but also other neo-Nazi symbols, symbols of Nazism. There are many of them. It's not just a swastika. And it's on full display. And you can go online and find training videos right now on YouTube of the Nazi groups, actual Nazi battalions from Ukraine training. And you can see the Nazi insignia on their uniforms. We've shown you. And isn't it interesting that in Canada, even with Nazi monuments and clear, undeniable evidence of Canadian ties to Nazi history from Germany and other countries like Yugoslavia, Latvia, that as we send money and arms and training personnel over to Ukraine, that we were then told that there are no Nazis. Oh, nothing to see here. There are no Nazis in Ukraine. None. Don't worry about it. No, nothing here. Remember when the special military operation began? About a year ago? We were telling you there are Nazis. We showed you the Nazis. And the mainstream media was like, oh, there's no Nazis there. And then what did Brendan do? Brendan went and he found for us some articles by the mainstream media exposing the Nazi battalions in Ukraine that they were then saying didn't exist. But they do. And now it's just so blatant. They do talk about it. It's almost like they just kind of don't care. They say, no, we don't. Well, we're not training those guys, but they are. We're not really giving, we're not giving them the weapons. We're giving it to the other soldiers. No, you're giving them the weapons too. It's inevitable. Those weapons will fall into the hands of and benefit those Nazi battalions as well, because they are fully integrated into the Ukrainian military, whatever's left of it at this point, whatever hasn't been obliterated. So that's the reality of it. Not many people talking about it. There was a flurry of reports early on, a year ago, when the Russian special military operation began. But after, maybe a month or so, the talk of it kind of died down. We don't hear too much about it now, just occasionally. But it's a real thing. As a taxpayer, I'm offended, frankly. Deeply disturbed and worried about where all this is going. What is it we're really supporting, and what does our government really stand for? If we have a government that arms and supports Nazis, then what are we? What are they? What have we become? After World War II, I mean, we were supposed to be fighting. We fought the Nazis, right? Didn't we defeat the Nazis? Last night, in our conversation about this spiritual warfare that we are engaged in, we also talked about the League of Nations that then went on to become the United Nations. And in our conversation with Ian Nunn last night about all of this, he said what I agree with, that while the formation of, say, the United Nations was predicated on the idea, at least publicly, that by forming this League of Nations or this unity of nations globally that would act together, we would prevent war in the future, because nation states would talk to each other, and that we would all collaborate and agree upon a new international rules-based order, a new world order. This idea goes way back prior to World War II, World War I. The idea was, at the time, at least the public was told this, it was to prevent war, to prevent a world war again, another world war, by bringing the countries together. They're supposed to be cooperative, collaborative, the United Nations, united. Each nation state's still sovereign unto itself, but it becomes a complex thing, doesn't it? If you have an international rules-based order, then these international rules that are then codified, not just based on international law, but the law as dictated by the United Nations, then that becomes the law. And then they need to have enforcement mechanisms. And if there are countries that don't adhere to that, then they become the outlaws, right? Now we get into something so much more complicated. So I have to ask myself, what was it that we became after World War II? What was it that the Nazis wanted? They wanted more breathing space, didn't they? They were taking over countries, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. But they were using military force to do it. But then after the war was over, we ended up with the United Nations. And then the United States and Canada, they welcome in many of these former Nazis. And yes, we had the Nuremberg trials, but that was complicated and the jurisdiction was limited. Yes, they certainly held certain people responsible, the main figures, and yes, there were convictions, but jurisdiction is limited there. That's sort of a sidebar to all of this, because I think the jurisdiction was purposely limited to allow a lot of the others to escape. And it seems pretty clear to me that the war never really ended. Now I'm sort of analyzing, stretching things out a little bit in a more, in a broader sense, in a macro sense here. And this is me providing perspective from my personal worldview. But it seems to me that after World War II, the war never truly ended. And that's why we wound up with the Cold War. All we really had happen was the US, the United Nations, NATO, it absorbed what was Nazi Germany, along with collaborators from other countries, from Italy and others. The cancer that was Nazism in World War II, the tumor came right in, welcomed with open arms, assimilated, and it took over the body. And so today, while we think we're the virtuous ones, we're the philanthropic, we're the compassionate, we are the ones that are merciful, that we seem to have the answers, that our governments collaborating together, working together, have the way forward. I am not so sure. In fact, I'm quite skeptical now. Because what we're really, I think, witnessing here, especially now, it's being exposed now more than ever, is the tumor that has taken over the body, now controlling the body. And so those monuments in Canada, they're more significant than anybody realizes. And the depth this goes to, don't kid yourself. This infection, it runs deep, deeper than we realize. It's a problem. That's why we're in the middle of this Third World War, fighting this bizarre, twisted, upside down, nothing makes sense, bloody war. Because if you're a Nazi in 2023, you might not even know you're a Nazi. You might have just been indoctrinated, and you might have the mindset and not even realize it because you don't know your history. You don't even realize what you've become. More than that, if you're a Nazi in 2023 in North America, you've been hiding. You've been part of the undercurrent. You don't come right out. None of them came right out. Even after the Second World War, they didn't come out and say, look at me, I'm a Nazi. I'm here to, do my thing and take over the world. No. You rebrand yourself, man, because Nazism has such a bad name. Oh, of course, you've got your neo-Nazi groups, and some of them are out in the open, but, generally a lot of those guys aren't too bright anyway. Not smart enough to kind of keep it low-key or rebrand yourself and present yourself as something you're not. that in truth is what is going on out there. A lot of people I know, they're being led around by the nose by different political organizations, including Nazis, who have rebranded themselves as and present themselves as something they're not. And you know, you never really know what's in someone's heart or someone's mind until they really, really expose themselves. You could know someone for a long time, and if they're hiding or misrepresenting themselves, you might never really know until it's too late. There's a lot of that going on right now. There's a lot of it. The greater question is the people who do know, the people who are experts in history, the people who could really do something about this, and the people with the most at stake, like many of the Jewish organizations out there. I am still perplexed as to why they haven't been more aggressive in calling this stuff out, especially in Canada and the US. Even internationally, a lot of this stuff is not really called out properly. It's pretty clear that in the case even of Israel, some of this is tolerated and there's even collaboration that goes on. And I think sometimes it's because of money, economic benefit to particular countries, politics. And sometimes it's a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so, like politics, war also sometimes makes strange bedfellows. So you see strange alliances happening, and you've seen it time and again with the United States, where they pursue their own interests, especially economically and geopolitically. And they'll do it they'll even collaborate or arm groups that, even terrorist groups that they traditionally have been fighting against, or supposed to be fighting against. They even set them up. They arm them. And if you manage to, if they serve the purpose at the time, then they get into bed with them, use them. ISIS. Create it, use it, oppose it, ally yourself with it, then reject it. Tell the public something that makes no sense, turn everything upside down. And that's why things don't make sense, because all this stuff has been rebranded. Who is what is who? Up is down, down is up. They've got us all confused. You don't know which way's coming, which way's going. You don't know who's who, what is what. You think that guy's a freedom fighter? He's actually a fascist. You think that guy's a communist? He's actually a freedom fighter. You think that guy's an anarchist? And oh, wait a minute, he's doing the right thing. But oh, that guy, I thought he was a good guy and he's actually doing bad stuff. Labels. People attach labels to themselves. You have to look beyond that. You really do today. To really know what the true motivations, what the goals, the agenda, what's it all about? What's the person really about? What's this organization about? Look beyond the labels, folks. Do a deep dive, not just on the internet. Read their documents, read their mission statements, read their declarations, read their charters, their proposed constitutions, whatever it is that's on their websites. Find out about them. Don't let people lead you around. People who are often false prophets sit there and misrepresent themselves. And then you end up with a situation where, like that young lad, that young freedom fighter out west, from freedom fighter to fascist in 12 months flat. Hitler, he says, wasn't such a bad guy. Look at all the good things he did for the people of Germany, he said. That's not an opinion. That's a paraphrase. That's an observation. Be careful, Canada. Be careful, USA. It may already be too late. God help us all. I'll return after this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, 8:30. So yeah, I'll take a few calls. I'll set up the phones, and you can join the conversation in just a moment. Let me run the video with the phone numbers so you know how to contact us.
Join the conversation. Call 1-833-975-3733. That's 1-833-975-FREE. Speak up. Speak out. Make your voice heard. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom by defending your right to free speech. Be a Maverick. Join us.
Okay, the phone lines are open. And the number to call is 1-833-975-3733. 1-833-975-FREE. Won't cost you a penny to dial that toll-free number and weigh in on tonight's conversation. So I'm going to run another promo while I push a few more buttons, get the phone system integrated into the video so that all the audio can be heard properly. Here we go.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right, again, 1-833-975-3733 is the number to call. And I think we'll probably get quite a few calls in tonight. You can also support the channel by going to freedomreporters.com and donating. We sure could use the support to keep the phone lines operating. Really appreciate the support we've had in the past. Extremely helpful, more than you know. And you can go to the Give, Send, Go page to donate there if you're more comfortable with that at maverickdonations.com. That's maverickdonations.com. Most people donate over here at freedomreporters.com. And if you're watching on Rumble, which you can't right now because we're still running the NCI, they're running late as usual over there. streaming that on that channel tonight. But if you do watch over on Rumble, you can you can donate through the Rumble rants, which work, I guess, similar to the super chats in YouTube. Right now we're demonetized, so 0 revenue coming in on YouTube, and that means you can't use the super chats either. Working on a solution. I'm not sure if we can get it to work or not, but we'll deal with it as it comes. And again, the number to phone in tonight, 1-833-975-3733. And let's go to our first call. Who do we have on the air? Go ahead. Hello. Are you there? Hello, go ahead. Well, maybe we'll put them back in the queue. Okay, let's go to Steve then. Hello, Steve. How are you?
Not too bad, Rick. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah.
I wanted to say congratulations. I really enjoyed this show tonight. You know, it's a challenging subject for anyone to take on, and I just wanted to say I thought you did a good job of it.
Thank you.
And say that I appreciate that.
Thanks.
I do think that if you look, you're going to find that rot goes back before the Second World War, and pretty sure you're going to find it back even as early as late 1800s, and pretty heavy and thick if you know where to look.
Yes.
I won't take up much of your time tonight. I just wanted to say I really appreciate you taking on these challenging topics. And just if you're interested, I had an idea about a show you might want to do sometime, if that's okay.
Okay.
You had mentioned about Trudeau and him saying that we don't really have a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I hear that, I know you didn't say it. I know he said it.
Right.
It irritates me. Oh boy, does it ever irritate me.
Yeah.
I've driven coast to coast, quite literally 4 times. I've driven north through Yellowknife up into, well, beyond the tree line.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived in 5 provinces. I've been in 10. I've lived in 1 territory. I've done it. And I can tell you this culture is rich and deep, and it runs from coast to coast in so many ways. I think you should have a roundtable. Get, a Newfoundlander, East Coaster, a Quebec, like a Quebecois, Métis, Ontario, Alberta, all of us. Get us together, do a roundtable. It might take a couple, but let's show Trudeau how thick this culture really is, and that we are proud Canadians, even though we have divergent backgrounds.
That sounds like
and we can send it to
idea.
him afterwards.
I like that. I like it.
I mean,
Yeah.
I wanted to live in every province. Like I said, I've only been able to live in 4 provinces and 1 territory. I lived as far east as I could get, far west as I could get, as far south, and as far north. And I'm not kidding. Yellowknife, Vancouver, PEI, Windsor. I lived in Windsor for a year and a half. I've lived in Northern Ontario. I've lived in Alberta in 2 different spots. I've done it, and I love this country. But anyway, I just thought maybe.
Yeah, we can try to put that together. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think it'd be fantastic. But anyway, it's your show, and you can do what you want. I just thought it would be fun to do.
No, it's our show, my man. So, yeah, I like that. I'm not sure how to put that together, but yeah, maybe we just promote it and even just do a call-in show one night and get people from all over the country calling in, and put a conference call on of some kind, or maybe get people to, maybe we put it together somehow and get everybody in the video. We can do it. We'll figure it out. That sounds like a good idea.
I think
it'll take me a while to find a day to do it, but we can do that.
I bet you if you mentioned it on your show, after a couple of days, you'd have enough people volunteering to give you their time. I bet you got the reach to do it. You can bring in the callers from the South there that like to call in too.
Yeah.
Do a North America version.
Yeah. Yeah. The U.S. is very much like that too. Depends on, where you go. There's, different cultures all over the U.S. There truly is a difference from, state to state to state.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
At
rich.
least they're Oh, actually, I have an additional comment. I was going to say at least their leader, and I try not to use the word leader or ruler. They are our elected officials. I don't like to say that, they're our employees, but, when they call them our rulers, I think that goes to their head, and they actually think that they are, and they're not.
No,
They're our equal.
Yeah.
Just have a privileged position because we offered it and gave it to them temporarily.
That is correct. That's right. People need to remember that too. The people need to remember that.
Yep. Especially that leader. It's at our leisure that they exist in that position.
That is right. They're supposed to represent us.
Yeah.
That's their job.
And even the king, he's supposed to be first amongst equals, not best amongst equals or above equals. He's supposed to be first amongst equals.
That's right.
Represent us, our interests.
That's right.
So, anyway.
Exactly right. Thank you, Steve.
I don't want to get too preachy.
Okay. Great call.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay. Take care. All right. Let's go back here and see if we can pick up whoever it is that's on this line. Are you there now? Hello. No, don't think you're there. I'll put you back in the queue. No audio coming through. And we'll move on to the next one. In fact, that's the same caller twice. Are you there on this line?
Hello.
There
Hello.
you are.
That's me.
Hi there.
There I are. I don't know what happened because there was no beep and then I couldn't hear anything, so I dialed back again. That was me. I would have been first.
Oh.
Anyway, thank you, Steve, for your call. That was awesome, by the way. Steve, good job. And I think that was me that mentioned that about Trudeau saying that we have no culture and how much it upset me. Yeah. And I'm 110% behind you, Stephen. Thank you for bringing that up because literally I think Trudeau has been to task at diluting the Canadian culture as much as he can so that he can infiltrate us with all this ideology and BS. And he's been a busy beaver. And I think it's a great idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. And I think you'll probably get so many calls you won't be able to handle it because we've been suffocating under this regime of being told we don't have a culture, and all the immigration we're getting drowned in so many newcomers that are what culture we have is. I think that's part of his plan is to dilute us so much that we actually lose what culture we had. That's what it seems to be to me, But yeah, so that's what came to mind when Steve was talking there. But I missed part of your show because all of a sudden there was an emergency broadcast from Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, and that set me afire. And I had to run to the post office and get something in the mail. You might want to see his broadcast because he put a message out to all Canadians to send a message to him, and there's specifics about it. I already sent mine. But everybody needs to go to Lieutenant Stephen Rogers' Twitter or his Facebook page and do what he said because he's coming out all guns a-blazing supporting Canada, and he's just asking us to do one little simple thing. And
what's that one simple thing? What's he want, or can we say?
He wants everyone to write on one, no return address. Do you want me to just give you the instructions?
Yeah, go ahead. Just say it here.
Okay. I'll give you the instructions. Let me just click on it so I get the address right. And he actually addressed Trudeau and he said, we're doing everything by the letter of the law. We know what you're doing, blah, 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 blah. So the mailing address is Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, Campaign for America, P.O. Box 225, Nutley, Nutley, New Jersey, NJ, New Jersey, 07110. All you got to do is write on a piece of paper, SOS, from Canada to the United States. Put it in an envelope. That's all you got to do. Don't do a return address. Put it in an envelope and send it to him. That's it. That's the instruction.
What's the purpose of doing this?
he's going to take the entire bag of mail that he gets from us and people from all over the world and put it on the correct people's doorsteps, as it were, and be our voice.
And what's he concerned? Is it about Bill C-11? Is that what it's about?
Yes. Yep. He's going to fight for us to not get silenced.
Okay.
So he did a short little broadcast. He was really quite fired up, and so yeah, I did it right away. So I ran out the door, so I missed a part of your show. But it was so weird that I saw that you're doing something on the Nazis, because I fell into a rabbit hole today on exactly that, because somebody posted something in the chat. I clicked on it and went, oh my God. And that going through that link that it says that there is a, whatchamacallit, underground base, underground Nazi base in Nelson, BC. There's a whole whack of information on it.
There's
and I was like, what?
Underground
and then
Nazi base in Nelson, BC.
Yeah, that's what it said. Somebody in the chat posted a link and whatever, and I just fell through the rabbit hole. But it got me to thinking about Ursula.
Sounds like a rabbit hole.
It was a rabbit hole.
Yeah. We better.
I don't know if it's legit or not, but it was on your chat, and that's why I thought that maybe that was maybe why you went into that, or it might have been just a coincidence. But you know, what I wanted to ask you, Ursula, and was here visiting Trudeau, and she's, you know, from the UN and part of the WEF and all of that. And we know, like, how deep is that connection with the whole Nazi thing?
Well, I think it's pretty deep. Because I think it's more about, I think, to give you a proper perspective, I think what's happened is you have this new alliance that has been formed. You've got this unholy alliance between what was the West and now the Nazis, and they've created the fascists in this hybrid form with the woke left, and the fascists have created the globalist movement through the UN and the WHO and the WEF and all these organizations, and that's what it is. So it's very fascistic. It's authoritarian. It has all the earmarks of fascism. As far as the political ideology goes, it's very authoritarian for sure. We've seen it in play during the pandemic, and that's the reality. That's what it is. So that's the new Nazism.
And so the new world,
globalism.
Right. And so they're combining the UN Agenda 2030 and this SDG thing and the New World Order. It's all one big ugly package deal, right?
Yeah.
So their list, and this was chilling when I read this. I read their agenda. One world government, one world cashless currency, one world central bank, one world military, the end of national sovereignty, the end of all privately owned property, the end of the family unit, depopulation control of population growth and population density, mandatory multiple V, I guess that's vaccination, universal basic income, microchip society for tracking and controlling and purchasing and travel, implementation of world social credit system like China has. This is actually from them. Trillions of appliances hooked into SG monitor system, Internet of Things, government raised children, government owned and controlled schools, colleges and universities, ding, ding, ding. The end of private transportation owning cars, all businesses owned by government corporations, the restriction of non-essential air travel, human beings concentrated into human settlement zones / cities, the end of immigration, the end of private farms and grazing livestock, the end of single-family homes, restricted that's blurred. Restricted I and use what single and use that I don't know, restricted something and use that serves human needs. That's a pretty chilling list because aren't we seeing it all play out?
Yes and no. It's true. Everything you listed, it's all part of an agenda, part of their agenda. These are all goals. Will all of it come to pass? I would argue no. Some of it is in play now. Some of it will come to pass. Some of it won't. I think it's important that we keep things in perspective. I think there are people out there that are exploiting that very list and scaring the bananas out of people with it constantly. The reality is we still, if people will, here's what you really need to wake up to is we still have the power. We just have to realize we have the power. And one of our previous callers pointed out quite rightly, I think it was Steve who said, you know, the politicians are supposed to represent us. We still have the ability to get rid of them. Yeah, and all we have to do is vote them out. Now, if we have enough people who become aware and care enough, then we can do that. We need to, you know, we do have the ability to do it because these globalist organizations, they don't really have sovereignty over us. The only reason they have sovereignty over us is because our politicians give it to them because they sign on and participate in it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You put a different politician in who has the best interests of the country at heart, who is a nationalist, Canada first, USA first, then all that goes out the window because we're just not playing that game with you anymore. But we need politicians who come in and are willing to do that. Now, there's corruption. I mentioned Canada on the corruption scale. We've gone down. We're rated at 74. Why is that? Because a lot of these politicians are on the take, I think. And from
unfortunately,
globalist organizations, we can end it. And it doesn't have to come to pass. And I think honestly, here's my hope and my optimism. As things become more apparent to more and more people, people will step back and say, whoa, wait a minute, we're not dealing with that. And you're seeing that we are winning. It's just, it's incremental. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly and slowly and slowly and slowly. And then bam, it happens fast. Because then things flip again.
Yeah, it's very incremental for sure. Because sometimes it seems like we're all standing still, and this agenda is going full force, and it does get kind of scary. Especially when you walk out your door and you see weird shit happening. Like for me, I'm seeing, you know, these fast electronic cameras attached to poles all of a sudden that weren't there, and you know, and I look them up and find out that they're part of the smart city plan, and I'm like, eek, you know, gets my heart racing, right?
Okay, but wait a second. There's a perfect example. I don't think you need to worry about it. Not that. People have got some people have got people all jacked up about that. Why do you care? Why are those cameras there?
I don't want to be living in a smart city.
But wait a second.
They're tearing up the roads.
No. You got to keep it in perspective. This is what drives me crazy because people are losing their minds over things that they.
Well, I'm not losing my mind.
People are getting jacked up. Look, a street light with a camera on it. What does it do?
No. This is something totally different. I can send you pictures. It's not the normal street light thingy.
I know
we've already got four of them on that.
It's like Philips and all these companies. They have them. They're equipped with cameras. They're equipped with sensors. They have gunshot sensors on them.
It's called Mobi or something.
Yeah.
It's not Philips or anything, and it's like I looked it up and I researched it, and they even the company itself, it even talks about the smart city plan and all of that. So
Yeah.
I do know, like I did look into it. I took photos of it, looked it all up, and
Okay, well, what
you
is
know,
it then? What is it?
it
What
is
is so sinister about a traffic light with a camera on it to monitor traffic patterns?
well, it's not. It's a part of the smart city plan. That's what it
Yeah, it's
said.
part of. So when the
So
street.
what makes
So
me
what
nervous?
makes it smart though? Why? What the reason? Can I tell you why? It's pretty simple. They put a street light here, right? Right now, if the street light in front of my house goes out, you know how they find out about the light being out? I have to phone them, or someone has to call the city and say the street light's out. Then they have to, it goes down a chain of people until finally some guy comes around and changes the bulb. In a smart city, that lamppost is connected to the internet. That's it. When the light goes out, when the bulb burns out, it sends a message to the control center so that they know that light is out, so that they can then send someone around right away to replace the bulb to keep people safer. That's one of the ways that works. They also
it clearly states on the site, Rick, that all the extra data collection that it can acquire from everything.
It does a bunch of different stuff. What data is a street light going to take that is going to hurt you? How is that street light, regardless of what it is? I don't care what sensor they put on that street light. I don't care how sophisticated it is. You tell me how a street light connected to the grid, connected to the internet, is going to hurt anybody.
It's part of the data collection thing. It's going to connect into everything else.
What data is it collecting that they're not already getting that is going to hurt you? Well, tell me. I can tell you what data they collect. They collect traffic data. They can actually see license plates if they need to, so they can take snapshots of license plates. They can do that already. They are doing it already. They can track you with your cell phone much more effectively than they can just with the streetlights. But the streetlights can become part of that as well if they want them to be part of that as well. They use the data collection to monitor traffic, to determine how long roads are going to last, how soon they're going to have to repave, to determine how many accidents they have in particular locations. So they can then extrapolate that data and determine whether intersections need to be improved or redesigned so that they don't have as many accidents there. That's the kind of data they collect. They also equip those streetlights with gunshot monitors now, so that certainly in larger cities, that those gunshot monitors have sensors on them, so that if someone shoots somebody or if they fire a gun in a neighborhood, those sensors are so sophisticated, they can tell. Basically, they can triangulate the position, determine where the gunshot came from and what kind of gun was used, so that when police are arriving on the scene, they have a pretty good handle on what it is they're dealing with before they even arrive. And people don't even need to call to respond to a gunshot in a neighborhood. That's what those things are for. So I understand people don't want every aspect of their life monitored, and I get all that, and I'm not in favor of that either. And I was always against even photo radar, because I think that's a violation of our rights as well. But the reality is, like, people are freaking out over 15-minute cities and the lights and all of this stuff.
Obviously I've triggered you.
It does. This is like
it's not. I'm just trying to say it's something.
It's
anyway.
Everybody's getting triggered by this without even really understanding.
It's not a norm. No, Rick, it's not a normal camera. It's called Myovision Green Lights.
Okay.
It's a transformative acquisition, and it's backed with $260 million from Mavericks and TELUS and EDC. It's a lot heavier and more sophisticated than what you're talking about. It's different. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay, so I'm going to look it up. I want to know what it is that's so terrible about it. I want to know what it is. I keep hearing people talk about this stuff, and I hear so much crazy talk.
Well, it's not crazy talk, because I know where I live, and I know we've got all those so-called normal cameras, and we got a lot of them on the intersections and stuff, but they've gone overnight and attached this Myovision onto a regular pole on the sidewalk, and they've like, chained it to it, like literally chained it to it. And I got photos of it. It is not of the normal, what we're used to seeing. And so it was a little alarming because it wasn't there the morning I walked by it. And all of a sudden over in the night, they did that. And attached it with a chain and everything all of a sudden. And on that same road, they're ripping up the roads too. There's some serious action going on. So I'm just saying that I'm aware, and this is different, and it's not of the normal scope.
Oh, okay, but technology is coming, and there's all kinds of new technology being employed. So here's a whole bunch of, I type in Myovision streetlight, right? So I'm looking. So let's look, let's find out what this is right now. Here's intelligent streetlight monitoring from Applied Information Incorporated. There are a bunch of different companies. And here's Johnson Controls. Have you seen this one?
I don't know which one there.
Yeah, Johnson Controls.
This is Dave.
They're involved in the
No, that's not the same one. No, I took literal photos of it.
Okay.
What they attached to the pole, what they chained to the pole. That's not it. It's MIO Vision Green Lights.
MIO? Okay. I'll look it up.
MIO Vision Green Lights.
MIO.
I'm just saying it's something completely different than the normal traffic lights that alert them to street lights and traffic. That's all.
Sure.
There's movement.
Here it is.
Is all I'm saying.
Myovision traffic link. Okay, let's look at it and see what it is.
Myovision Green Light.
I got it here. Okay, let me bring this up. Different tab. I just want to understand this stuff, and hang on a second. Wrong one. There we go.
260 million to put around Canada.
So this is government contracts have already been awarded for this stuff, as far as you know?
Apparently.
Yeah, okay.
As far as I know.
Probably they're spending money on every other bloody thing out there.
He's throwing money like at the wind. This is terrifying too.
Insane, man. Like, and then I see that they're 1.4 billion more today for universities for artificial intelligence and robotics.
See, and we know why. We know why he's doing that for the universities, because they look at their agenda.
Yeah,
it's all part of it.
Okay, so let's see what we got here. See, Myovision traffic link. Is this it? MIOVISION.
Myovision Green Lights.
Yeah, it's got to be it. Myovision traffic link. Myovision is focused on solving the real world traffic problems.
Green lights. That's not. No. Myovision Green Lights. Green lights. That's not it. It's called Myovision Green Lights.
So there's Myovision. There's the cameras. And green lights would probably be the traffic lights.
No. Just type in Myovision Green Lights.
Okay, I've got it.
That's
Globe and Mail. Myovision Green Lights transformative acquisition.
Green light.
260 million from Mavericks TELUS EDC. I need to pay the Globe and Mail to see their article, and I don't subscribe. Here's Comutech Green Lights ahead.
Oh, I don't have to pay.
Here's Tech News. Okay, here's an article about it. Let's bring it up. See what they say. Oh, I did it again. Sorry, hang on a second. I took you out of this. No, it's all right. This is an issue that I know is being misrepresented by many people on many sides to score political points and get people jacked up. I know it. So it's something I don't mind investigating right now since it's been brought up. And people should know about it. Hang on. Yeah, I know.
Not there the day before. Overnight, they chained it to a pole. And it's very skinny, and it goes way up in the sky. And at the very, very top, it almost looks like a speaker. But it's not a speaker, I don't think. It looks weird. It's different than anything they put out on any of our streets. Like all the other cameras, we've got so many of them everywhere. I'm familiar with them. I know what they are, and it's no big deal. This one alarms me.
Okay.
It's new, and it
Here
was
it is. Here's
propped up overnight.
Here's an article. Green lights ahead as Miovision raises $15 million to grow smart cities platform. Traffic lights, and this is from communitech.ca, tech reviews. So it's a trade publication. Traffic lights, like businesses, are mostly about timing. If they don't sync up, you're not getting anywhere quickly. Today, as his 13-year-old company announces a $15 million in Canadian funds new investment, Curtis McBride appears to have a long string of green lights ahead of him. Miovision, the traffic tech company McBride co-founded in 2005 to automate vehicle counts at intersections, is poised for substantial growth thanks to a confluence of factors that he might not have foreseen back then. When we first started out, he said, we're selling mobility products to governments using wireless networks. McBride said, adding that some early would-be customers and investors didn't see the potential in that kind of market. He goes on and says, but all of a sudden we wake up and you've got smart cities, you've got the Internet of Things, you've got artificial intelligence, you've got government tech mobility as a service. All of these macro trends are converging, and we kind of woke up at the nexus of all of them with 10 years under our belts, McBride said. As a result, Miovision may have the inside track in the emerging race to build, in software terms, what McBride calls the, quote, fundamental architecture for the 21st century city. He goes, I look out into the 5 to 10 year horizon, we see huge opportunity for us to go out and build the smart city architecture layer upon which cities of the future will function as autonomous vehicles and other trends reshape urban mobility, he said. My instinct is that there is a race. If it's not on already, there's certainly the horses lining up at the gates. Helping Miovision bring out of those gates will be the $15 million in funding announced today, which includes new investors, BDC Capital and HarborVest Partners, along with Miovision's largest existing shareholder, McKinnon, Bennett and Company, and McRock Capital. The investment in the form of a convertible note will give Miovision time to work on increasing its valuation in preparation for raising a large venture capital round. The new funding will allow the company to expand distribution channels for its Traffic Link product, a software platform municipalities use in a way that McBride likens to a smartphone for intersections. Data collected by Traffic Link allows city governments to, and here we go, optimize signals for better traffic flow, give priority to emergency and transit vehicles, and do better traffic planning. Do you understand what that means? Are we getting it?
Of course I do.
Yeah, so I'm just asking.
Yeah, I get that, but it's the other mentions about the horses to the race, you know, because they're the whole smart city thing. I mean, they are,
they need
this is part of it.
Those polls, the data they collect will be used for the autonomous driving technology. So for the self-driving cars and trucks. So that'll be, they can ping those your vehicle will ping those traffic lights and use it to keep your car on the road. That's part of what that's about. If I take that to understand that. So he goes on and says, if you start to think of a city as a data platform now, the application layer that you can build on top of that data platform is pretty exciting. I think the way that we experience not just mobility services in cities, but just city services in general is going to go through a pretty exciting transformation in the next 10 years as more and more services can be delivered on top of the data platform. You know, I can go on about this, but this is what he's talking. He's talking about traffic control. He's talking about turning red lights green for ambulances. He's talking about syncing traffic lights to maximize the efficiency of traffic flow to get better fuel economy.
Can you go back to the paragraph that they talk about in the preparation of smart cities? The infrastructure for smart cities?
Yeah, he did mention that. So he's talking about creating a layer of infrastructure for the cities of the future. So what does that mean? It means that it's exactly what I just said. These traffic lights will be equipped with sensors and the ability to communicate wirelessly with a command center, so that as vehicles are driving by or people or whatever, like they're picking up information all the time, and they're pinging. And they're
definitely going to be a lot more. they're going to be a lot more detailed than what we got. What we have right now is dinosaurs
Well, I mean,
compared to what they're about to.
the thing is, though, like, what are we going to do? Like, I don't.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying.
What is it about that scares you? What is it you're worried about?
Well, it's the roads getting ripped up, and then everything's kind of happening so fast. It's like they're preparing to, choke our access spaces out. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, we're not gonna, be allowed to leave or come and go as we please. That's what's happening in other places.
I'm going to say something to you right now, and you can disagree with me, and a lot of people in the chat will, and you're probably going to hate me. That's not going to happen.
I hope not.
I guarantee.
I don't hate you, Rick. I mean,
you know why I know it's not going to happen? Because as much as some people are trying to scare all of us and tell us that that's the case, it is not the case. And you know why I know? There's no way they're spending over $1 billion to expand the Gardiner Expressway if they're planning on locking everyone into a little area and preventing you from leaving, like treating you like cattle. They're not spending $13 billion on a Volkswagen battery plant for electric vehicles if they're not planning on producing and selling vehicles to people. And if they're going to sell cars to people, and they plan on selling cars to people, they are no doubt going to expect to drive them someplace. And those vehicles have ranges of hundreds of kilometers.
When they're allowed to.
Not within 15 minutes. The truth about the 15-minute city is that, yes, they do have these jurisdictions. Yes, there are people who want to restrict or prevent you from driving if they can because they hate cars. And some of them are in government. And so there's certainly that aspect to it. But that's not going to happen. And you will be allowed to drive out. It's just that they're going to tax you. It's a different method of taxation, a different system of taxation. If you go outside this area a certain amount of time, it's a user tax. So the more you use it, the more you go outside, the more you pay in tax. They would view that as a progressive form of environmental taxation. It's not that you get jailed. It's not like you're imprisoned. It's not like you're not allowed to leave. They just don't want you driving your car as much because they are trying to find ways to deal with traffic congestion, especially in larger, heavily populated areas like New York City, which is already at a point where it's almost impossible to drive your car in the downtown area because they have so many people. Keep in mind that a city like New York has so many people living there. They have half the population of Canada jammed into one city. It's a completely different animal than what we have in Canada. Now, that being said, we do have some real wingnuts in government who keep on doing crazy things like building bike lanes in communities where the bike lanes are never used, like in the neighborhood where I grew up. Nobody ever rides a bike down the bike lane.
And that's exactly what's happening here right now. Yeah. Like they're doing really strange stuff that doesn't make any sense. But I mean, all of this can, as they implementing all this incredibly smart technology to read eye retinas and whatever social credits, like the digital currency. I mean, I think ultimately that's the idea, is to connect all of this together.
Of course, but they're doing it already. It's like
the end game. I know.
But the thing is, I see what people are afraid of. The thing is, there's no point in being afraid. What you need to do is get smart and understand that there's no way you're going to stop this technology from coming. It is coming, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not. All I hear from our side, well, not all I hear, but most of what I'm hearing is we need to stop it and go back to like the horse and buggy. I mean, or, like, what are you going to do?
I don't know, Rick. I'm just saying it's something I've noticed, and and how fast it's happening. I mean, it was overnight, literally overnight, Rick. It's fast.
Yeah.
And that part scares me.
Sure.
Because they can't fill a friggin' they can't fill a pothole in 3 months.
Yeah, that's right.
And all of a sudden, it's an emergency to put this crap up everywhere.
Yeah.
That's all. That's alarming to me.
Me too. I mean, I get it. I understand. It's just that, Yeah, and I'm not directing so much of this at you. I don't mean to, because you're getting the brunt of my frustration, and I apologize for that.
I
You,
sure
you
am.
don't deserve it. You don't deserve what I'm laying on you, because it's kind of pent up in me. But
I know, I could tell.
it's
I
just,
triggered you.
yeah, to a degree you have, because I know that a lot of what we're being told on the I'm hearing this all the time. It's like, they're going to kill everybody, and we're going to be imprisoned. And if we don't do something about it, we're all going to die.
No, well,
We're going to shove us in a
the
refrigerator
thing
and
is,
eat our brains. Like,
well, that's
no.
crazy. But no, I mean, we do know and understand the one world government plan, right? Ultimately, they want to have full control of everything.
Yeah.
Right. And it is a bit of a shock to the system when you see this shit overnight, right? Like I said, they can't fill a pothole in months, but yet all of a sudden they're attaching things with chains to poles like it's a big emergency to get them out there. Yeah, that's a little bit unnerving, I got to say. Because normally city crews aren't operating all that quick with all the important stuff like taking out the freaking garbage or, whatever. They're not very operable, but all of a sudden, damn, they're fast and quick with this shit. That unnerves me. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, the things that unnerve me about here's what I really see happening myself. And again, this is just my perspective, and other people will maybe have a different one. Yeah, these smart cities are coming. Yes, these lampposts are up. Yes, we're going to have autonomous self-driving cars. It's inevitable, because that's the way the technology is going, and they're going to push forward with it. And it's like any other technological advancement. It's we're not going to put a stop to it. Let's just be realistic about that. Am I concerned about it? Absolutely, because I can see a time in the very near future when we're going to be told you're no longer allowed to drive your car. Why? Because human error is too prevalent, and they'll say you can't drive your car, you could kill somebody, you have to let the computer do it for you. So they're going to take all the fun out of that. And then, because people aren't actually driving and in control, yeah, they'll probably stop buying the cars, and then they'll have fleets of vehicles out there instead of vehicles that you own personally, and you'll dial up an Uber and it'll show up at your door, but there won't be anybody in it, and you're going to climb in and go wherever you want. And therein lies that you're not going to own the vehicle, you're going to be happy because you'll
own nothing but be happy.
That's right. Now, am I happy about that? No, because I'd like my freedom. Now, that being said, I think that there's still, at least for maybe the rest of my lifetime, will still be an element, maybe not for the rest of my lifetime, but at least for the next few decades. There's going to be a group of people who are going to demand that they still want to be able to drive their car. And why do I say that? Because I see people buying Lamborghinis. I see companies like Ferrari out there who still want to sell their product to people who have a lot of money, and those are the elite, all right? And they're going to want to go on a weekend trip someplace with their super high-end sports car worth $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to want that. And so those kinds of things are still going to be out there. And I just don't see the complete takeover and the imprisonment that everybody else in our little bubble here is anticipating. I think there's still hope. We're not quite there yet.
I like to think there's still hope. I'd like to think there's still hope. In the meantime, people are planting friggin' flowers in potholes.
Yeah.
People are painting pictures pointing to potholes that have been there for some of them over a year. It's just, it's a little alarming. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I want to get back to the Nazi thing because,
sure. Thank you for putting up with me. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, likewise, I think.
more so. Thank you tonight, because you triggered me. This has been an issue for me where it's kind of like, oh my God.
I know.
Oh my God.
I know. I get it.
And I just,
Well, I just tend to look ahead too far because I read up on what these idiots are up to and what their big plan is. And it kind of unnerves me a little bit sometimes. But I pay attention, right? And I like to think everybody is paying attention because we want people awake and paying attention. But getting back to that whole Nazi thing, what I did hear, what you were talking about, was damn good, I got to say. And I think Canada has been a refuge for many Nazis for a long, long time. And I think that is how Trudeau slipped Freeland in on us, right? How did she end up getting that position? That seems so like, just like everyone else, all these senators that Trudeau placed, 50 of them,
Yeah.
he placed Ebby. He wasn't voted in. Like, look at all these people that he's been able to place. They haven't been voted in by the people.
You mean
I don't
senators?
like the senators, and Ebby is an MP. He was placed. He wasn't voted in.
David Eby?
Right? Ebby. EBY?
Yeah, David Eby.
Yeah, apparently he was placed by Trudeau.
No,
and our governor.
No,
placed.
he's elected. He's an MLA.
Oh, I was told that he was placed.
No, he's
and there was people that were writing.
He's elected, and they tried to have what they're talking about there. That I think again people are confused. There was an effort by some freedom groups out there to have him removed from office through the recall process, which failed. They didn't get enough signatures.
Yeah, it did fail. It did fail, but. I mean, just as Trudeau's ability to place people, I don't know how that came to be okay because, obviously that's how Canada has been infiltrated.
I can explain that too, and it's because senators are not elected. Senators are appointed. Prime ministers get to appoint senators. There are so many.
See, that's got to change. That's got to change. That's got to change because look at all the.
It's supposed to be a chamber of sober second thought. So they become essentially patronage appointments, right? Where they will select people from prominent positions. And if you have a conservative prime minister, they tend to pick conservatives, but not necessarily politicians.
Yeah, but this is how they were able to infiltrate the cabinet. So that has to be fixed. In our system, that needs to be fixed, I would say. It's a big problem.
The cabinet is appointed, the cabinet is just made up of the elected members of parliament who have particular portfolios. So what the prime minister does is after they have an election, he looks at all of the members of parliament that got elected on his side of the house and within his party. And he says, okay, well, this person has the experience in finance and economics. So that this person will be the finance minister, and this person over here will be the minister of the environment and climate change. And this person will look after foreign affairs. He'll be the foreign affairs minister, and she's going to be the defense minister. And that's the cabinet, the people that are elected, and then they make up the cabinet, right? That the people with absolute prime portfolios, and then the rest of them who aren't in the cabinet, they become the backbenchers. They don't have a portfolio. They still get to vote, but they don't oversee a portfolio. That's why you see David Lametti is the justice minister. He's at that news conference today.
Oh, I can't stand him.
Yeah, but he's part of the cabinet, but he's elected. Those people are elected.
Right.
The Senate's a totally different chamber. It's after legislation has been passed by Parliament. It goes on to them, and then they review it, and they're supposed to help protect us by reviewing it and giving it sober second thought, right? And so sometimes it works.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it has worked, right? Because you have generally older people in there.
Not lately.
But it is a place where people are appointed. And so those positions become patronage appointments. Who was appointed there? Like Mike Duffy had a Senate appointment. He was like a journalist at one time, right? But then he got involved in that scandal and he ended up resigning. Who else? You just go through who the senators are and they get appointed.
I don't know. That whole thing just seems corrupt to me. I just kind of get the feeling that all of that needs to be Jimmy rigged a little bit and fixed so that it's fairer for the people. Because Freeland, she can go to Davos and be on the board with the WEF at the same time as holding her position here.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a
That's just-
conflict of interest.
well,
And, you know, there are ethics
huge conflict.
reviews that should
And
take
yet
place.
it's going,
and, yeah.
and they're not, but they're not. See, so something like things are slippery and slick in our government, and it needs adjusting. Like there's too many loopholes, it seems, that allow somehow this. Like, to me, it seems like there's a lot of treason and corruption and conflict of interest everywhere we turn. I mean, we got the Chinese police stations, you know, we've got Nazis. I mean, Freeland too, right? I mean, there's a lot going on and there's a lot at play here. I don't want to be awake. Put me to sleep, for the love of God.
Yeah, as bad as everything. I mean, I get it, and all those are legitimate issues. However, I will just say this to everybody. Always remember that regardless of what side you're on, all sides in a political struggle are trying to portray things in the most extreme terms in order to build support for their cause or their agenda. And so everything you look at when it comes to politics, especially today, especially in this time of global fifth generation warfare that we're involved in, especially now, everything is taken to the absolute extreme. And so always dial it back just a little bit to keep some perspective, because they're all sides are trying to scare you,
you
right?
know.
They all are.
Well, yeah, because fear controls, right? And everyone's juggling for control. Everybody,
That's
right? On the bright side, I don't know if you saw that Elon Musk did a good thing today.
Oh.
He suspended an account of somebody who created a flag. Did you see that? It was a pedophilia flag.
Oh, really? Oh.
It was a youth attracted person pride flag.
Yeah.
Good God help us all. I mean, there's just so much crap going on, but good for Elon. At least he did that. He suspended that account. Thank God.
Yeah. Well,
So, you know, I mean, I'm hearing mixed stuff about Elon too, but, you know, I'll take the good with the bad and celebrate the good and pray real hard to the good Lord about the bad. But, yeah, anyways, you know, there's so much going on, right? Like, whew, and I won't keep you any longer. You exhausted me, my man.
well, that's okay. We had a vigorous discussion tonight. We certainly did, and I think that you did very well, and I really appreciate you putting up with me. I really.
Oh, likewise, thank you, and I really do encourage people to go on to Lieutenant Stephen Rogers' page, his Twitter or whatever, and just do that simple thing. I would like to see that play out and see what happens. He needs, you know, people to do that, and I'd like to see what he does with that. Support him in it, and he's trying to help Canada. He's very worried about the Bill C-11, as I am. You know, the Bill C-11, C-18 business, and he still thinks that he can help turn that around. And I think we as Canadians, because he loves us so much and he's trying so hard to help us, that we should do what he's asking. It's real simple. It's just a stamp and no return address. Put the note that I said in there in the envelope and send it off to him right away. Let's fill up the mailbag and see what happens. Keep an eye on it. It's worth a shot. I mean, at least it's doing something, right? Instead of wanking about it. It's, you know, he's somebody in the United States that's fighting for us, and he deserves our support for that. I appreciate that kind of stuff.
All right, there you go. So people can go check out Lieutenant Steve Rogers and see what he has to say. I haven't seen that video. I did see one from a couple of months back where he was talking about C-11. He was.
This was tonight. He popped on right away because it was his reaction to it actually going to Royal Assent, and he's not a happy camper because he sees it as a security threat to the United States, and he's fighting hard. He's got lots of information and documentation. He's fighting for us Canadians, and I think we should support him. At least do that. It's just going to be a stamp and put it in the mail. All right. So there you go. All right, Rick.
Great call. Thank you. We love you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rick.
You
take care.
Bye.
Okay, good night. Bye.
And here's the man without a plan.
You got the marvelous help, the man without a plan, the master of all disasters, coming to you, Rick, live, baby. What a crazy night last night. After your show, I go on Discord, and Discord's another platform, anyways, set up by somebody in the group. Multiple people could talk. Can you hear me, Rick?
I can hear you, sir. Yeah.
Multiple people could talk in this Discord, but I'm by phone because I'm working and my phone's on the other side of the shop. I got my Bluetooth headphones on, right? So I can't see who's talking. And when I did that show with, you invited me on, by the way, didn't you, for Paul Hartman?
Yep.
You invited me on that show.
I sure did.
Well, I came on that show, right? And somebody on here, Pure Knight, didn't like what I had to say or something. And he was like, you should let Paul tell me what to say, how to act, how to do this. And nobody does that. I'm going to tell you to fuck off, okay? Plain and simple. I don't give a fuck who you are. Freedom of speech, okay? Freedom of thought. I'm all about that. And nobody tells me what to fucking do, period, right? So last night we're in this damn fucking Discord chat. And I said, you sound like a fucking girl. Well, it was his girlfriend, Kim RS or whatever. She's in this group too. And she's just starts fucking belittling me, right? So you're a fucking piece of shit, everything else. So I told her to go suck a bag of fucking dicks. Now he's trying to put that up here in the chat. I'm going to tell everybody how the way you talk to women, Leo. I'll talk to anybody that way. You don't fucking put a muzzle on the mouth of yourself. I don't give a fuck who you are. You could be the Prime Minister of Canada. I'll tell him to go fuck himself too. Joe Biden, go fuck yourself. Okay, that's me, and nobody's going to do it. Plain and simple, right? So we're going to move on to that. So that's cleared the air for you, Mr. PK. You're not going to put that over my fucking head and say, "Oh, you're a womanizer, Leo." No, anybody who fucking tells me what to say, how to do it, I'm going to tell you to go fuck yourself. Plain and simple. So we're going to move on. The Nazis. Let's get to the Nazis. Okay. And our area is full of Nazis, right? And you know Ipperwash. You know Ipperwash. Ipperwash is a camp. It was an internment camp for Germans, apparently, and some German prisoners that came back. And that's in between Port Franks and Forest, Ontario, right? Dead center almost. Yeah. And it was a Nazi camp. It's still there today. The natives took it over. It's their land. Yep. And it is, right? So there's Nazis everywhere. And anybody who tells you what to do, what to say, how to say it, like how to walk, how to eat, what to eat, you're a fucking Nazi. Okay? And that's the way it is. I'm not going to point the fingers in the group. There's a few of them. You know, I didn't even want to call in last night, Rick, and I told you why. I didn't want to call in, but, you know, when I hear somebody really sweet, I'm not going to say her name or in here, okay? She's on here somewhere. Okay? She's a very sweet lady, and she's always gentle talking, and fuck, after last night with the flag and everything else, she was ready to lose her fucking mind. It sounded like her head was going to pop, okay? So I tried to calm the situation, and I called, right? And next thing you know, I'm the bad fucking guy over here. Well, fuck you too. How's that sound? You know who I'm talking about. So today's Fuck You Friday. I'm glad you can watch it. Are you guys laughing on Rumble? How about on Twitch? Are you guys twitching over there on fucking Twitch? Well, let me fucking tell you something, okay? Your vet visit you're talking about, this is no word of a lie. I'm on Discord, and his fuckface ended up getting me banned off of fucking Discord or whatever, I don't know. So I'm chatting with D, and I accidentally at 2 a.m. split my fucking hand open off the fucking job, okay? And I'm bleeding like a stuck pig. So I take a picture and I show her. She goes, "Oh, fuck, you need stitches." Well, my buddy and his wife own a veterinarian 24-hour clinic, and this is no word of a lie. I haven't even talked to you about this, Rick. Okay, deal fucking comment on here. I said, my buddy owns a veterinarian clinic. This is at 2:30. I said, I got to go. He's got one dog waiting, right? And he took me in for free. Yeah. Passed up my motherfucking hand for free. I was in and out in 10 minutes. Now that's healthcare for you.
Yeah.
You can't beat that, right?
Oh, there you go.
You know,
but my story about my dog having better health care than me ties right in then. So what a great segue that was.
It did.
Yeah.
Dee's agreeing right now. Yeah. It was funny because at 2:30, I said, I got to go. I got to go to the vet. I got a 2:30 an appointment. He wanted to ask me if I wanted anything for pain. I said, you got any doggy cotton? whatever that is, Oxycontin, Doggy Cotton.
Okay.
I didn't take nothing for pain. Couple of butterfly stitches, and I'm out the door, right? But great people, right? It's good to know people, especially 24 hours a day, right? So that is what it is. You know, I'm not going to make this call very long, but I just want to say, you know, to the haters out there, go fuck yourself. Okay, and I know they're laughing on Rumble. You fuckers on Rumble, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, you're not getting censored in Rumble for saying the fuck word, but just be yourself. Don't let anybody tell you what to say. You know, and that same fuckface is telling you how to run your show on here earlier, Rick, and I commented, there you go. You're nobody to fucking tell Rick how to run his fucking ball game. Get on the fucking team. Why don't you stick your face on this fucking screen? He'll fight you like you did with RV, okay? Because you're the man, Rick. Plain and simple. I don't give a fuck what anybody's got to say. I got your back, brother. We're going to do that jet skiing thing in the summer. You got to get your boat license. Okay. Easy to do online. Cost you $20. Boat smart. And then you're certified, okay? You're certified. It's another license in your back pocket, right? And you can do it online at your free will. It's in modules, right? It's a pain in the ass, but you know what? We get pulled over. We got insurance. You got a license. You got a right to be on the machine. We're going to go to Pablo Island. Check it out. You can do a show from there. Well, that being said, go fuck yourselves, guys. Happy fuck Friday.
Thanks, Leo. That was a great call. Thank you. All right, let's move on, man. Yeah. Oh my. Can we just get along? Anyway, who's on the line now? Go ahead. We've got some delay there. Somebody is I don't know. Okay, I'm going to put you back in the queue and we're going to no. Hello, cupcakes. It says cupcakes on the screen. I don't know why. I don't like it when this happens. Are you there? Hello? Hello. Come on, come to the phone. I don't want to hang up on you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next call. Put this person back in the queue. Maybe they'll come to the phone after. Who's on the phone now? Is this Eric?
Yeah.
How you doing?
I didn't know it was Go Fuck Yourself Friday. Thanks, Leo.
It is now. Maybe we'll make it a tradition.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be instead of Flashback Friday. I'm just phoning in to thank him for telling me about what to use with my bags after I bring them home from the grocery store. Plant my pot plants and tomatoes in.
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah.
We're talking about just about everything tonight, or what?
Well, I mean, whatever. It's like I try to control the conversation and keep the flow of things going, and I'm never successful. So, whatever.
Yeah, well, I have trouble watching and the feedback on the side there too. So that always gets me distracted. I can't do it, so I gotta focus on you first.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't have too much to say tonight. I'm just super busy with life, and I'm trying to sneak in a few times with you guys in Ontario there. You're a couple hours ahead, so I'm 200 years behind in Saskatchewan here. So just trying to keep up with what's going on, and it's been a great show tonight. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to thank Leo for that. He's always getting criticized, so I wanted to give him kudos for that bag idea. Anyway, we'll let you go for tonight.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate the call.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, take care.
Bye. Bye.
And I love Leo. I want Leo. Leo's fantastic. So, yeah. What else can I say? That's all there is to that. Hello, is anybody there? I know we're gone. Okay. I think the other caller who was on the line, we lost them. So that gets us to 9:37 p.m. It is, what's the date today? The 28th of April. How the heck did that happen? Where did all the time go? How did I get here? Oh, I don't know. That's a metaphysical question. I don't know how I got here. Whatever you do, though, don't get in a DeLorean and get it up to 88 miles an hour unless you know. I suggest you go into the past because then you know where you're going. If you go into the future, unpredictable. I'm afraid what might be there. Where would I go if I could go back in time? What date would I choose? Now, there's another show. But for tonight, we are going to wrap it up. I appreciate everybody hanging in there, sticking with us till 9:30. I can't believe the NCI is still running. At least it appears to be. It may have finished up. Yes, I believe it's over. So let me just end that one right now. We are ending the conversation, the broadcast over on the NCI broadcast. And so ends that. National Citizens Inquiry, Day 3 finished. The Red Deer, Alberta block done now, and I believe they are off to Vancouver next. So that's where they will be next week. And we will pick up the coverage at that point. And you guys can join the conversation next week on that. But we'll have more tomorrow here on the Maverick News Channel at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I have no idea yet what we're going to be talking about. I might dig into this whole Nazi thing a little bit more from a different perspective. I think there's more to be said about that. But I hope you found that helpful tonight. An issue that has been there for a long time, that Canadians have chosen to go like that too. Keep it in mind. We'll talk more about it. Thank you, everyone. If you're so inclined, please go to freedomreporters.com to donate or maverickdonations.com to donate. Please like, share, subscribe. Subscribe over on Rumble. You know the drill. We'll be back 6 p.m. on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.